Alright, this is going to be a guild interview that I'll be doing with a guild called Meat Grinders. A few of their members are patrons, and they have decided to utilize their monthly hour with me into a guild event. And we're going to be answering questions. I'm not 100% sure what's all going to be asked. I don't know what's going to be in store. This isn't a video. This is simply a documentation. So this will be on Unlisted. If you're seeing this, that means that you have special privileges to view it, and hopefully you're going to be able to get some cool information out of here. This video will not be about asking questions for viewers, but rather the people at hand. So I'm going to stop interacting with the camera or mic now, and I'm going to hop in TeamSpeak and talk to them.
I ran out of...
Are you just gonna send out one? Cause like,
Yeah.
I literally just killed myself in Battleground so I could look.
I'm sorry, my house is so boring, Gil.
Oh, it's really cool. I haven't even seen this house yet, so like.
Yeah, I've been spending most of the time outside.
Hello.
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 It's so difficult to try to furnish the inside.
Yeah, there's so much space to cover. Like that like winding hallway. Like I thought I was gonna be lost for a second when I opened the map.
It is way too big. This house is way too big.
It's bigger outside. Inside, it's like there's no space to do big sprawling things because it's very, I don't know, it has an interesting interior. I can't think of anything to put in here. Like I can't put a grand table because it's a stupid thing.
But this is like a throne room, kind of like
yeah, that's what I
the
figured.
Thane's room, yeah.
Probably a big statue in the middle and just random crap around. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, that would work too.
Oh, there's people. Anyway, thank you for coming today to help out.
Yeah, of course.
I know since the last time that you came here, we actually hit 200 members. So it's been there's been a lot of people that came in, and so we're like, hey, let's see if we can if there's any people that have questions that need answering or anything.
They just joined because they think, hey, they know Gilliam. They must be cool.
Yeah, it's been cool kind of just lurking in on the Discord and seeing what's going up every couple of weeks, and you guys have grown a lot. It's pretty impressive.
It's been interesting.
Yeah, that's always the word I
least.
use. Interesting.
To say the least, at least.
Hey, Shots, are you at RS?
I am. I'm fighting the whole group of DC that are here with a bunch of...
Okay, well, I kind of destroyed two battery. There are two battery rams,
Guys, we're here for questions, not for
and this is
discussing
like the
this.
third battery ram that I
I
destroyed.
know. That's why I'm being quiet. I'll be quiet.
Thank you, guys.
If anyone has any questions that they want to start off with, by the way, go ahead. Yeah, I don't have any questions personally off the top of my head, but I'm sure that like last time I'll have some.
Nope.
I know. Well, one thing that was oh, you guys are talking in zone chat. Is there? I guess this was a kind of a question that I had. Is there a set a set race that you need to use with Magblade? Do you know of, by the way, for Inferno staves?
This patch you want to be using Dunmer if you're using dual Inferno staves.
What about if you're High Elf or Breton?
I mean, those are still good races, but they're gonna lose out to Dunmer this patch, just because of the changes to the meta with them using Inferno backbar now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're still using Lightning backbar, so if you're doing like a lot of AoE dungeon, or in like a 4-man dungeon, or no one in your group is applying off balance, then High Elf will win. But if you're doing the standard double Inferno, then Dunmer is your number 1, High Elf is number 2, Bretons 3, Argonian 4, and then everything else kind of just really deteriorates quickly after that.
Okay. So if you're using a High Elf, then you want to use Lightning staves, or you want to use the Fire still?
Fire front bar, Lightning back.
Okay.
And you're gonna prefer the Force Pulse build if you're a High Elf.
Don't tell me that. I'm leaving.
I'm not a fan of the build either, don't worry.
Wait, did you say
don't
Force
like.
Pulse?
I do not like the how little sustain I feel like I have with it.
Force
don't
Pulse
like
Magblade?
Yeah, I mean, you might as well play a Sark at that point, in my opinion.
Are Sarks really that dead this patch compared to the other classes?
No, definitely not. You still want at least 1 or 2 Sarks in a group, because they're going to scale the best with Lightning Wall, and they're going to have Minor Prophecy in their kit, so like if you're doing AS especially, that's really, really important to have. And they still do really great AoE and cleave damage, because pets, and especially after the Atronach buff giving Major Berserk, like, they have a lot of group utility.
See, Simon, you just gotta work at it.
Hey, Gilliam, what about Magplar? Is Magplar dead?
I mean, they're kind of in the same boat with Mage DK, where they're not optimal, but they're still totally viable. Like, they have better survivability than a stamina build, because they have healing on their spammables, they have Harness Magicka, they have really good resource management with Channeled Focus, so, yeah, not going to be beating like a Stam DK or a Stam Nightblade or anything
I was
like that,
thinking
but...
more, like a Force Pulse ranged, whatever it is, Magplar, over just the, whatever it is.
They're really
Spamming
good.
your jabs.
Yeah, if you're going the ranged Templar build, you're gonna primarily be like a Resplar sort of thing, so you're gonna be giving a lot of group utility. They're really good for progression groups, especially in Asylum Sanctorum, like doing +2 and stuff like that. Anywhere where there's a lot of damage and people are kind of dropping because it's a little bit unbearable, like Halls of Fabrication and stuff, the Rage Templar build is really, really helpful to a lot of groups.
Do you know if they actually fixed the CP distribution with jabs this patch at all?
What do you mean? Where it was...
I was told like that supposedly in Dragon Bones they were gonna make it to where CP also is, or the jabs is also affected by CP. Is that...
Jabs has always been affected by CP. What they did was they changed the order of operations, so in this game, percents diminish one another because they have an additive effect instead of a multiplicative effect. So you're not getting the true percent out of it, so they reworked the order of operations so the higher percentages are early on, so you get a bigger damage gain out of it.
Okay.
So that did happen, but that also inversely hurt them in PvP, because that means that defensive CP now works the same way, so they lost damage in PvP if using jabs.
Rip.
Didn't that change? Because I've noticed that my jabs sort of hit harder now in PvP than what they did last patch. Like last patch, trying to hit jabs was like trying to hit Wrecking Blow. It was just kind of like...
You mean in responsiveness?
Pain in the arse.
In terms of responsiveness, yeah, they gave it an extra 1 meter in AoE, so it hits a larger area.
Also damage. I'm noticing that my damage is like a lot more, and that I can kill tankier people faster.
Are you playing in CP?
CP, no CP. Either way, doesn't really matter.
That's more... I mean, nothing's changed with that. The only difference was they saw a slight damage nerf in terms of in CP environments. In no CP, there is no difference. But since the meta has been changing a lot and people are running a lot different stuff in PvP, especially after the block cost changes, people are getting really, really squishy now because they're running higher damage setups, which means you do more damage to them.
Yeah. I went to like a tankier setup on my Magplar for PvP. That still does like a lot of damage and all that. It's just tankier than what it was last patch because of everyone running such high damage.
Yeah, Magplars are actually doing really well in the meta right now in PvP. They've seen a really big power spike since people are starting to move away from the blocking, because blocking is what hurts Magicka Nightblade and Magicka Templar the most in PvP. Because your damage is, your healing is based off of how much damage you do. So whenever someone blocks, it's not only cut in half by Battle Spirit and all these other things, but also by block. So less of that means more healing, means better Nightblade and Templar.
Yeah, Nightblades are crazy in PvP now.
So I still enjoy my Stam DK.
No. Stem decays have always been like easy mode.
Gotta fix my stam blade.
No, you first. Go ahead.
You mentioned in your past video that having Twisting Path on your front bar gives you more damage. Like, how much more damage is it than having it on your back bar?
It's like 100 or 200 DPS. It's very, very minimal. Because instead of recasting it early, which you do on your back bar, because it's easier, because cripple and wall are 8 seconds, and that's 12 seconds, you're effectively casting it at the 10-second mark, because you do wall, cripple, and then that, so there's 2 seconds left, so you're just getting 2 extra damage ticks every rotation, so it's really, really small. But it's also harder.
Do you know if there's still issues where if you land directly on a percentage point in CP, you don't get it, you have to go over?
Yep, you always need to go above a decimal. Like if it shows as 19%, you're gonna round down. There's one exclusion to this. I don't remember which CP node it is, but most of the times when you see a full percent integer, when it's just like no decimal places, the game is actually rounding it up. It's like 18.999, and the in-game text says, "Oh, hey, that's 19%," but the calculator says that's 18.999, and that's not a full integer. So I'm gonna round down. So in terms of what I do, I always make sure I'm above a percent integer.
So, like, instead of 75, we'd put 76 in then?
Correct.
Okay.
Which one was the exception?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Just said that.
I think Twerk just came in, to be fair.
Yeah.
This was such a debate one day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we were doing VA.
I believe it was Ellie Defender that we were talking about.
I do have a question. So before, you used to have to put your CP into Hardy and Ellie Defender before Thick Skinned?
Yes, that's still a thing.
That's still a thing,
yeah,
too?
you always commit your Hardy and Ellie Defender first, and then make sure those are committed, like you actually apply them, and then put your points into Ironclad and Thick Skinned after.
Confirmed here, everyone.
Everybody's furiously clicking the equal sign and doing that right now.
Like, honestly, friendships were lost over that fucking debate.
Mainly everyone with me. I started it.
Oh, there's a hole there. I don't remember what we were doing, but man, that was interesting.
What
really?
Oh, I had a small question, which might not be best answered because it's kind of a situational thing. You know, in the past, how like healers were using Mending Worm. Is it like Mending Yorvolds, IA Yorvolds? Like I've heard some things about Mending that it's not as good right now as IA. Do you know of that at all?
So it is definitely a situational thing. A lot of that is coming down to people overhyping Yorvolds because it's a new item set, and they're like, "Ooh, I want that. I haven't had a new set to run in eons." Personally, Yorvolds is not as nearly as strong as people think. It is relatively helpful, mainly in Craglorn trials, where you're able to manage major force uptime a lot more readily than you can in places like halls or asylum. It also saves a little bit of magicka because you get extra duration out of your combat prayer, so that's nice. But that's pretty much it. What you're going to be getting out of that. So, mending is still ideal in 99% of this game's content where damage is prevalent. In Craglorn trials, where damage isn't as prevalent, you can run Yorvolds instead. And then IA is only really good in Ethereal Archive on the first 2 bosses because they are immune to concussed, as well as Asylum Sanctorum because you can't ever possibly get that uptime up there, as well as the Council in Halls.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense then.
Is the drop rate of buoyant armature motifs affected by anything?
Not that I'm aware of. That's a little bit out of my jurisdiction. Sorry.
See, I was told that you had to do Vardenfell quests to increase the job chance. But I may be lied too.
You lied to all of us, therefore, because we're going off.
It's a common.
Isn't Armament Voyager just comes from chests? Isn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So treasure map chests are the best for that. That I know. So if you have like a treasure map for Vardenfell, that's your best way of getting it.
Alright.
I know Hetty got it out of a Hoth chest once.
I have gotten both of mine out of Hoth chests, yeah.
Interesting.
I've got one out
I
of a
guess
Hoth
because
chest.
it's technically Morrowind.
Meanwhile, I
Some of
just
you
need a
get
bunch of
learn
crap.
from Cap Ragwin trials from the imps.
More Hoth.
But
We
yeah,
can wait till Friday, and then we can get to the second boss again, and then die.
people are like,
No, we'll do it.
oh, if you do the Vardenfell quest line, you get an extra half % chance.
There is a question in Discord. So Elm mainly plays Stamsork for PvP. Do you recommend bleed builds over typical two-hand and sword and board builds? For group play, I also watched in like your Stamsork bleed build for Clockwork City, and do you plan to change it?
So in group play, you kind of want to stick with the standard one because the bleed build is mainly for smaller scale because it's a dot build. You don't have that ability to when you're fighting a huge group of people, because it's single target. So yeah, you want to go with like the standard, more AoE focused with reverse slice, hurricane, streak, stuff like that. Just doing a lot of cleave damage. That Master's two-hander with Brawler is really strong on Stamsork. And in terms of updating the bleed build, I might, but it's definitely, there's so many things I have to do before I can get to that.
Is there a way to stop the Stonebreaker boss in VSO from turning around and chucking poison at people, or?
Nope. He's like a troll. That is a aggroless ability, so he'll just pick one of 12 targets, or if you have pets, they'll pick those two, and just throw it at him. It's uncontrollable, unfortunately.
Oh, that reminds me. What about that exclamation point in the VSO? Hetty?
Oh.
So I've noticed that the black hole, like, you have a exclamation mark basically above your head just before it comes out. Is that referencing anything, or?
The black hole in Sanctum?
Yeah. Yeah, so on the Manticore, you know how the...
Do you have the picture, Hetty?
Yeah, I still would have the picture somewhere.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
We noticed it once, and I noticed it like right after he mentioned it, but I haven't done VSO since, because fuck VSO.
Are you sure it wasn't an add-on?
Yes.
Because that is actually dodgeable, that mechanic. So it could be an add-on telling you, hey, dodge.
But I've seen it like at above my head, and it doesn't spawn anywhere near me.
Yeah, that might be raid notifier telling, like, as a mechanic of when that's happening, like, fail. I've personally never seen it.
It does look like it's part of the game, though. It's very... I don't know.
Is it posted somewhere?
Where's this picture?
I'm trying to find it real quick. Oh, there it is. I found it.
Oh, okay. It's gonna be in guest chat channel up at the top on Discord.
Whenever it wants to load.
It's up. I see it.
Oh, like this little green thing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've never seen that before. That's the animation for the spear, in terms of, like, he's throwing that at someone.
Is that really?
Yeah, that's the same visual effect as his spear. It's the golden green pillar.
The only thing is, I do remember that because he mentioned it, like, right after... I think we had a wipe at that point, and
Yeah, so, like, the boss has gone
spears were all
down.
on us, on the kiters.
What? It hasn't gone down, but, like, it's done its animation of where the shade comes out of it. The serpent comes out of it. So that's why it's kind of slumped over on the rock there.
I'm surprised we're just now seeing that.
Reptar is asking for a friend. Is two-hand Stam Warden viable in PvE? And if so, what would the build look like?
Viable, yeah, anything's viable in this game as long as it isn't like a hybrid build or something like that. Definitely not competitive. It would probably look a lot like other people's two-handed builds. I know Alcast has one with his Stamsork. It would look a lot like that. It's pretty much your front bar is all two-handed abilities, like Executioner, Wrecking Blow, and Reverse Slice, or not Reverse Slice, Carve. And then you'd put like Shulk, because that's your main ability to damage with as a Warden. Your back bar would still be a bow, pretty standard. Trap Beast, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Betty Netch, probably for... Would you use Automatons? No, definitely not as a Stam Warden, because Shulks is like 6 to 10% of your DPS, and that is poison damage, so no, not Automatons. It would probably be just a very standard setup like Night Mother's Gaze or Twin Fang or something like that, and then pair that with either War Machine or Vicious Ophidian.
Would you use Acuity Automaton on a Stamsork?
No, I don't ever want to run, I don't ever want to run a setup that doesn't have Minor Slayer in it on a stamina build. We do way too much damage. That 5% comes in so much more than it does on Magicka builds because it's a percentage. The higher your raw damage is, the better it's going to be. And as a stamina build, we have a lot of raw damage. You always want to have Minor Slayer set in your setup.
Okay.
Unless you're a buff bitch.
So unless you're Yeast on his Stamplar.
Well, I mean, Stamplar runs War Machine too, so...
Oh, that's true. Oh, Jesus. I'm missing the guest chat.
Are there any quote unquote like unknown buff sets that aren't really used in trials?
You mean like niche sets that people don't know much about?
Yeah, sort of like how Mechanical Acuity was around, but nobody really knew about it until a couple months ago, and then everybody started using it.
Not really. I know some groups have been trying to use things like Matoria's Servant, but to put bluntly, that's fucking garbage. Yeah, there aren't really a lot of sets out there. There are some, like Combat Physician and stuff like that, that aren't really buff sets, but they're group sets that are oriented towards that some people swear by. They can help with, like, defensive capabilities, stuff like Imperium. Or not Physique. What's the set from... The Damage Shield set? Imperium, that's what it is, yeah. So that's a decent one. Stuff like that, but in terms of buff sets, yeah, there really isn't much out there at the moment that isn't known. The reason why Acuity wasn't big was it's an extremely contextual sort of setup, and since a lot of stamina builds were Khajiits, and Acuity sucks ass on Khajiits, that's why people really didn't find out about it for quite some time.
Makes sense.
How much DPS would you lose from going from Hundings to Automaton with your Poison Injection and Light Attacks on a, let's say, a Stamsork or a Stamblade?
You'd lose a lot of damage on a Stamblade because a lot of your damage is disease and stuff like that, like Relentless Focus, huge burst of your damage. Killer's Blade is also disease damage. Incap is magic or disease, depending on morph, so definitely don't want to use automatons on Stam Nightblade, but on the Stamstork, In terms of pure single target on a target dummy, it can look nice, but you do lose a lot of damage on poison injection. Probably about, in terms of like holistic DPS with group, like somewhat of like 4-man group buffs or something like that, easily about 1,000 DPS. But you gain most of that back on light and heavy attacks, and raining slashes, hurricane, and stuff like that. But Automaton's really not a fan of, especially in group play, especially in this patch, because synergies are quite a large source of your damage, because they are no longer on the GCD, meaning you can do a lot of extra DPS this patch if utilizing them, and there are no physical damage synergies in this game. So Automatons is kind of like a target dummy hero sort of set. It can look really, really good on like the 3 or 6 million, something like that, or you have like a full 12-man raid just beating on the 50 million health one, but yeah, it's kind of baity.
What's your thoughts of running Alkosh on DPS instead of tanks?
Awful. It can't crit. Once that set was unable to crit, it removed all viability as a stamina build, being able to use that effectively.
Okay.
Ripvar.
I actually really enjoyed Alkosh back when proc sets were somewhat decent in PvE, because it did have really high potential. If proc sets could crit once again, then it would definitely come back into the viability as like a support DP.
Des,
Yeah.
be nice.
Just wants to know if he can duel you.
Oh god.
In what?
Oh no. Oh no no
Can
no.
he, if he can duel you.
PD, please.
That is, so I'm gonna refrain from answering.
PvP, one-on-one.
Oh, duel. I thought you said something
Yeah, duel.
completely different.
Duel.
Yeah, I was like, dueling. What is that?
It's the accent.
Oh my
Best in
gosh.
slot accent.
Okay, dude. Stop.
I'm gonna go
Oh,
Google
God.
dueling now.
Are they actually dueling?
I don't know.
No, Dash ran
That's what I
off.
want to see.
No, I'm not. I didn't know. I just fucking.
Des ran away.
I'm still here. I'm about to run off. I'm fucking embarrassed. Fuck you, Hitty.
By the way, Gilliam, I would like to formally apologize for our little shit group that was in Vivek that one day, or I wasn't sure that one day. And I was running around on my like level 20 Stamplar Spectre.
That was so good. You actually joined a group for a minute, Gilliam, and you just fucking left straight away.
When was this?
This was like a few months ago.
Probably a month or two ago. Oh man, it was so bad.
Oh, yeah, because fucking Fangrush invited me, or asked on stream for me to join, but then was in offline mode, so I couldn't come into group, so I was like, ah, fuck, I have to say something in zone chat. I didn't even look at names, I just was like, okay, I don't see Fangrush in, I'm out of here, sorry.
Yeah, I looked at it and I was just like, you guys really invited Gilliam, and I'm on my fucking Red Guard healer, Stam healer, because of fucking AP.
You're Stam Pilar with the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, because I had a bow back bar.
Sounds like a legit build.
Hey man, I needed AP.
Yeah, the rapid regen AP generator build. Damn.
Yeah. You could go, yeah, we could say that. Let's just call it that. Oh, shit, I had a question. I can't remember what it was. No, I can't remember. Is there any other questions from the people that are being muted right now at all that we need to? All right, yeah, I just got one. So Saloon Girl wants to know if you recommend Julianos for Mag Warden. If you still recommend Julianos for Mag Warden.
Totally, yeah. You can also run Necropotence if you're using Netch. Still quite strong, but especially if you're a high elf, which is the ideal race for Warden, just because so much of their damage is ice, and Force Pulse is better than Cliff Racer. Yeah.
Yes.
And then I also had a question personally. So I use my Mag Blade, High Elf Mag Blade. I have not noticed anything really that good with Mama. Is there is there a different rotation that you have to do with Mechanical Cutie and Master Architect, or am I just being really bad at it?
You can never let it proc when you're on your back bar. So like if you let it proc when you're about to bar swap, you're gonna lose a huge portion of your damage. So you have to kind of learn when to bar swap and when not to. So like if you know that it's been roughly 20 seconds or so and your back bar is about to fail, or there's like 3 seconds on it, you want to bar swap and reapply them so that it doesn't proc as you're bar swapping. That'll be a huge damage loss. The other thing is you want to try and always sync up your Architect proc with your Acuity proc. That's also the other really important thing with that setup in particular, is if you have one up and not the other, you're losing a tremendous portion of your damage.
Yeah, because I noticed sometimes like it'll be decent damage, but then otherwise it's just like shit. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, that setup is for like the super well-knowledge player who has done this rotation like thousands of hours, and it's like they can do it in their sleep, sort of.
So LZH.
yeah, people like that, exactly. It's really strong, but.
Raptor's got a question for you. He's asking if you don't need to double bar Netch for Mag Warden then.
No, because Netch is a unique form of a pet that you activate it and it's active for a duration. So it only needs to be on one bar, because whenever you cast Netch, Necropotence will activate and it won't fade until Netch falls off. So if you never let it fall off, then it will never go away.
He said thumbs up.
We're just gonna read off whatever Reptar says every single time now.
Mag Warden is best in slot.
Oh.
Kitty, please.
No.
Mag Wardens. Let's see. I just got a whisper. I don't know if it's for this or not. No, I did not. For those of you guys that are just joining us, by the way, if you guys have questions, either whisper them. You can whisper them to me. You can whisper them to any officer or anyone else in here. Because I know that there's a few people that are muted. You can also post it in the Discord chat, or you can post it in guild chat. Or in zone chat if you're hanging at my house, I guess. There's a few of us here.
So, Battle Fest outside your house, by the way?
It's turned into a legend.
Oh, jeez. Let's see. I got a question. Wolf says, what would you consider to be the best class related to raw damage? Who's the DPS that can do the most damage? I guess, yeah.
Probably still Stam DK. Stam Nightblade is relatively close this patch after the resource changes and Relentless Focus streamlining. But Stam DK is just, you put in way less effort and get much better results in most situations. You're tankier, you'd never have to worry about resources. Stam DK still has the most in terms of ceiling, but if you mean like raw damage, like who's doing the most alone, like who has the most damage built into their kit, Stam Nightblade. Like we have every single buff that's important. Major Fracture, Minor Berserk, bunch of resource management. It depends on what you mean by raw damage. Ceiling or built-in.
Okay. I have another question. Firewire, I would like to hear your thoughts and opinions about the Tooth Row set, both in PvE and a PvP standpoint.
Tooth Row, never using it in PvE unless you are like on a budget build sort of thing. So if you're trying to save money and you don't have access to potions, then it can be nice there because Major Savagery is really, really helpful in terms of holistic DPS, especially as like a Stamina Sork or Nightblade. But in terms of like actual DPS, it's really, really weak. Now in PvP, that also comes back to the, hey, I don't have the option to always run Savagery on my potions. Maybe I want moves, maybe I want lingering health, stuff like that. That's very, very helpful, and it's actually really under the radar set in PvP. It's really, really strong, and a lot of the really good PvPers use it, but don't talk about it a lot. It's strong.
Alright, I think... Alright, Alright, he says thanks. He also does a lot of PvP. So. Looks like someone else is typing too, real quick. You got a few people typing, actually. What would your build be for raw damage Stamplar / buff Templar? Stamplar.
Raw damage versus? I mean, those are two different builds.
I guess, yeah, raw damage versus buff.
So with buff, I would do something like Sunder or Night Mothers, and then pair that with War Machine, and then a 2-beast monster set, depending on what you're doing. Veladreth in most situations, can use Crags if you're not at pen cap, and you can use Stormfist as well, although I really don't like Stormfist in group application, because with synergies being what they are now, you don't really have to heavy attack to sustain much in group content anymore. In terms of raw damage, I would probably go with, I don't know, 5 Vicious, 5 Huntings. I don't know. The raw damage setup on a Stamina Templar doesn't make much sense to me, just because you, based on your kit, you make the most sense to bring buffs to the group. Really cheap ultimate, that's AoE, Minor Fracture and Breach, a shorter rotation where you kind of heavy attack here and there. So Sunder or Night Mothers make a lot of sense.
So, do you think running Sunders and Night Mothers at the same time would be really good then?
No, because again, War Machine. You have Empowering Sweeps or whatever the hell. Crescent Sweep, really, really strong. Like, better than Dawnbreaker for DPS. Really cheaper than Dawnbreaker. Allows you to not have to worry about slotting an Adric Spear ability on your back bar or something like that. Just really, really efficient skill. So, War Machine for group DPS. But, I mean, if you already have, like, 2 or 3 people, like, if you have, like, 2 Mag Blades running Master Arc and, like, a Stand Blade with War Machine, then yeah, that's overkill. You don't want to run that. Then you could do Sunderflame and Night Mothers, but in terms of optimization, it would make more sense to have a Stamina Templar wear War Machine than a Stamina Nightblade.
Would you ever run Automaton on that Stamplar?
Nope, because Purifying Light does not scale with weapon damage or Power of the Light, so that's like a big portion of your damage, and it can't crit. Poison injection and synergies and stuff like that. Like, I'd never run automatons anywhere unless I'm in PvP. That's the only place I would consider running it personally, or on a target dummy. But we all know how I feel about that.
Wolf also asks, so to be sure, I guess to confirm, it's better to be a Stamplar with 30 or so DPS, 30k or so DPS under a 90% power light than a 40k dude.
Yes, correct. In terms of what you're bringing to the group, you are enabling way more DPS than that as a Stamina Templar, buffing everyone.
What would your preferred helmet for Stampsork be? Oh, monster set, I mean. Like, Selene's or Stormfist, and then Veladreth on the bosses that require it.
I guess on a Stampsork, I would go Stormfist just because the double implosion proc chance. And plus you have amps to both shock and physical damage in your kit. You're not really going to be proccing Selene's too much as a Stampsork. It's not going to have an awful uptime, but Selene's is not really that strong in most situations in PvE. So yeah, I would, if I wasn't running Veladreth, which I would probably be running in 99% of this game's content in group scenarios on a Stamsork, then I would run Stormfist, yeah.
Hello, whoever just joined. I don't know who it was. There's too many people. I can't tell who's just
Reptar
joined.
asked, I have a Defile infused sword. What do you mean Defile? Do you mean Cyrodiil's Crest?
I think
The set Defilers.
Oh, Defiler.
Morrowind.
No. No, if someone's ever going to be using that set, they're usually a newer player. So they're probably going to buy armor pieces and jewelry instead, because weapons are obviously going to cost more. I have been seeing it used a little bit more in PvP now, but you'd probably just be better off having it be a mace or an axe anyways, so...
We have another question. This one about Mag Sorks. Netch's Touch or Julianos for non-pet Sork.
For non-pet sword, Julie.
Is there ever a case where Netches would overpower?
Netches only wins if you are a heavy attack pet build. So if you're only doing heavy attack damage and using your Volatile Familiar Splash AoE.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, Netch's Touch is actually quite weak. It's more of I'm new to Magsork, I'm looking for something easy and left-click build sort of thing.
I feel called out.
I actually watched a video where they compared Julianos to Netch, and if you use this Sork Ultimate instead of the Atronach, that Netch actually came out ahead.
Using Overload?
Not using Overload, no. Using the Destro Alt with dual shock stabs.
Yeah, but that's like a very specific setup that wouldn't actually be used in most combat situations. Sorks are usually running Lightning Front Bar and Fire Back Bar if off balance is already present in group. The only time they don't is they use Double Lightning if off balance isn't present in group. And they're probably still going to be using the Force Pulse build, not the Lightning Heavy Attack build, if they're trying to really pump out damage. But yeah, like if you're trying to optimize an easier build where you're doing something that isn't really difficult to manage with resources and a intense rotation, then yeah, Netch's Touch is helpful, like I said, but it's more of a, I'm a newer to this class sort of thing, I'm looking for an easier build. Storm Atro or Ballista for Stamsork? Storm Atro in group content, always. Major Berserk is really, really strong, and Storm Atro does crazy good DPS this patch.
No, Reptar. If I see you dropping Storm Atro on AA hard mode.
G-kick.
Triggers me. Try and taunt the body Storm Atro.
That's absolute news to me, because I also heard that the Storm Atro was a drop in DPS.
Nope, I sat in front of a target dummy and a Sork for about 4 hours testing all of the different ultimates, and Storm Atro won every single time by at least 800 plus DPS. And that was using Haunting Curse, so if you're using Daedric Prey, which a lot of Sorks these days will be using, just because Atro is so strong, then it'll do even more DPS.
Yeah, that's one thing. I don't use Curse. I'm a straight shock Sork. Everything is shock damage. I do use Force Pulse, but you know, Netches does buff at least part of the Force Pulse.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're specialized for that, like, if that's your playstyle, then yeah, Netch's Touch is very helpful.
As a stand in Trials, should I be running wings or should I not be running wings?
Bird of Prey? No.
Mm-hmm.
The uptime is
Okay,
way
why not?
too short. Because it's a DPS deficit to manage. Every 10 seconds you have to cast it, it's not worth it. If it had something else built into it, then it would be worth it. Like if it was like a relentless focus or something like that. But
told you.
Oh, hey, it's ease.
Even if it fits in with my rotation perfectly?
yeah, because that means you're just giving up a heavy attack or a spammable light weave every time you're
Alright.
activating it.
So what would I put in place of it? Just another animal skill for that 2% more damage, or?
Yeah, something like that. So, I mean, it would depend on what your bars are already.
Would you use Shrouded Daggers or Cliff Diver as your
Honest-
spam?
I would probably use Shrouded Daggers, because AoE potential. Like, Shrouded Daggers does really respectable single target, and the cleave potential of it is the really big selling point. When do you ever do pure single target in this game?
Never.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, aside from very, very rare bosses like Mantier, that most of this game's content is either AoE or cleave. So, Shrouded Dagger, hands down.
Got one person in guest chat. Purple IA or Willpower as a 3-piece for a non-pet mag sword.
That depends on how much damage you're doing already. So if you're breaking, I believe it's like 32.2k DPS as a baseline. So like without either of those sets active, which is pretty hard to do. Then you want to go with Minor Slayer. But if you are not hitting that, then you want to go with Willpower, because Willpower buffs your base, while Minor Slayer buffs what you're already doing. So that percentage has a chance to overcome the raw damage that Willpower would give, but again, it's dependent on if you're hitting a baseline already.
Another question. Have you ever tested on a Magblade Lover Mundus and spreading the points from Spell Erosion around versus Apprentice with like 20 to 30 in Spell Erosion?
Yeah. I mean, you still win with Apprentice in group situations. Lover wins when your group does not have enough sources of penetration. So if you're not running things like an Infused Crusher enchant, maybe with Torrigs, don't have things like Alkosh in group, then yeah, Lover is always going to win if you don't have penetration sets in your, which is why I always talk about that. Like, especially in places like Asylum Sanctorum, where a tank can run Torrigs, but will still never be able to apply it to all the mini-bosses and Olms, Lover is really, really strong. But if you're talking about trying to save up on CP, you already don't have many points into Erosion already in an optimized group. You have like a max of like 15 or 18.
Ooh. Yeah, the new combat metrics, actually, the beta version shows group penetration, which is really nice.
Let's see, got another question. For Mag DK DPS, should it be Inferno or Shock VMA backbar? And what are the up/downsides on each?
I think, was that Wolf's question?
Yeah, I just got it in.
Yeah, I think
chat.
he PM'd me. Let me read it. Mag DK DPS, Inferno or Shock males. Inferno backbar is your always ideal on Mag DK. Again, the only time you ever want to run a Shock Staff on your backbar this patch is if you are in a group and they need off balance. So if no one is applying off balance, then you want to do that for your group. It's going to be a DPS deficit for you, but it's going to be a group-wide DPS benefit. The off balance is still really, really strong for resource management. Exploiter passive if there's stamina DPS, 70% heavy attack damage. It's really, really helpful. But it is always a DPS deficit to run a Shock Staff on your backbar in terms of pure optimization.
You also pick up damage with Flame Lash too, don't you?
Yep, you do more damage with everything. But if you're talking about like a solo Mag DK, you don't need that because you already apply off balance with Flame Lash now. The only time you wouldn't is if it's against a boss. But bosses are immune to off balance for such a long time anyways that Flame Lash is like a 200 DPS benefit over Molten Whip if you can sustain it and manage it, which most players cannot.
Let's see. We did have a few more people joining, so if you guys do have questions and you're muted, just whisper one of us or post it in the guest chat channel. What are you? What? Twerk? As usual, Twerk has managed to confuse the shit out of me.
Everyone in general.
What did the name Gilliam come from? Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. The name of a character in that game that I don't know the proper word for it. Not identified as, but shared similar beliefs with.
Related to.
Yeah. I guess that's a simpler way of saying it.
Gilliam's Island.
It's your new website name.
Gilliam's Island ESO. It looks like somebody is typing in chat. So I'll give them a second. Oops. Two people are typing. See ya, Blub. Repstar, what are your questions? You have a mic, you can just talk.
Talk!
Alright, so ZYZZXX. Say, how do you feel about armor type mixing? Heavy, medium, light. Does the Undaunted passive make up for loss of crit/skill loss?
Yeah, 511.
Skill cost.
Yeah, 511 or 5-2 is going to be ideal in most situations in this game. The only time 7 medium wins is if you're on a target dummy. Because a dead DPS does no DPS, and the extra health and mitigation that you're getting out of 511 really, really helps. You also get extra resource management. People think 7 medium has better resource management, but since your resource pools are going to be higher, you're getting more resources back every time you hit a synergy from the Undaunted command passive, thus putting 511 ahead.
Hetty, this is what you should do. You should record that. The dead DPS does no DPS, and then every single time that we're in a trial with Simon, just play that on auto.
Whoa! That's fired.
Why are you calling me out?
Yeah, 511 is ideal in most situations. In places like Halls of Fabrication or Asylum Sanctorum, if you are daring enough to do such, then you do 5-2, which is 5 medium 2 heavy, because you really, really need the extra health in those situations. And you'll still get extra resource management from 5, or from 2 heavy as well, because you do get the Constitution passive from having 1+ pieces of heavy armor on.
Yes, Reptar, 511 is best to use.
Oh, wow.
And Reptar forgot his other question. That is no surprise. It'll pop up again soon, don't worry, Reptar. Yeah, after he's done, after he leaves, it'll just pop up.
Well, I am recording this, so I'll upload it on Unlisted for people who missed it and maybe want to listen to what was discussed or anything like that, and I'll post it in. So.
All right, cool. I just got another message from somebody.
Yeah, I missed the beginning, but it's been quite insightful. I got to tell you.
Wolf says, if you challenge you to a duel, will you do it?
I'm not gonna take duels. It's gonna detract from being able to answer questions.
Yeah. Probably a good idea. Poor Wolf. Oh, he's in the room actually. He's over here just chilling around. Have you been able to do Scale Color and Fanglair hard mode at all?
I did them on PTS. I really haven't put much time into live servers.
How were you able to do Scale Color? Like, what are your thoughts on the the hard mode for Scale Color?
I think they're both over the top with the rate in which mechanics happen. They're very play perfectly or abuse mechanics like Phoenix and Yakuden. I had a long discussion with Finn in terms of the direction with this game's PvE at the moment, where they really love the idea that you can instantly resurrect some, or that you have the ability to bring someone back from the dead. So from now on, you can expect every single instance of the quote-unquote hardest gameplay in this game to be built around you dying. Like, that's a guarantee. Boy. And I really disagree with that gameplay element. I find that to be a very poor decision in terms of what you want to do.
It wouldn't be their first poor decision, so...
all three of us are stuck back here.
Where did you guys get stuck?
Help.
Oh my god. I'm just
you don't continue.
Yeah, Scale Color in particular, it really comes down to understanding the rhythm of the fight and controlling your DPS. Because a lot of Scale Color and Fanglair, unlike other instances, are very HP percent driven. So a lot of mechanics will happen based on the health of the boss. Now, there are still timers, granted too many timers, where you can have overlapping mechanics where you just are presented with a situation where you cannot do anything against, which is why I dislike the direction we've taken. But when you really, really focus and everyone is familiar with the content and constantly addressing and adapting to the situation or whatever the boss is doing, that's when it becomes a lot easier, and why some people can make it look very, very easy compared to others.
Okay. Because I know we tried Scale Color hard mode, and it just seemed very, very, extremely difficult. And so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's
it was
overloaded.
Just us being stupid.
Fang and Scale are both very overloaded with mechanics. There's so many things that can happen, and if you are unlucky enough, or you aren't paying attention and controlling the variables enough, you will be presented with situations you are not going to return from, unless, again, you are using sets like Yokaden or Phoenix.
Right before the launch, they had the Twitch video, and they talked about how normal mode would be easy mode, just like every other dungeon. Veteran would be a little bit easier than the DLCs that they have put out, and hard mode was going to be far surpassed anything hard mode the game has ever seen. So that's the direction that they're going.
Which I love. That's a great idea. But at the same time, difficulty should not be determined by, hey, you're gonna die. That's not true difficulty. Difficulty are mechanics that force you, as a player, to constantly address and be on the fly about and interact in multiple and engaging ways. Being engaged with your content in a way that you can manipulate the variables and strategize and do things the same way, or do the same fight in different ways. That's good content. These two instances, you can't do that, really. There isn't a lot of strategy building because a lot of the mechanics force you to do a rather arbitrary action. Oh, ghosts are coming. Go to said area. It's not like you can create a safe zone yourself. You can't use defensive ultimates because it's a one-shot mechanic. That's the problem with it.
I think that the point goes to when they actually did another Twitch where all the devs ran hard mode, and it took them 6 hours to complete the dungeon.
They didn't even.
And they didn't complete it on hard mode. That's a problem.
That is a problem. So where does PTS come in? Where does adjustment come in?
I didn't see anything for the latest patch, at least.
Well, on the PTS, both of the dungeons were cleared, and they were actually in a much better state than they were now. Granted, that was because there were unintended mechanics that the developers put in that allowed players to do exactly what I just said with strategizing, and like the pillar in Scalecaller. You could utilize the pillar. It wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card, and there were some mechanics that were still buggy, but it allowed you to address the same content in a multitude of ways. You had option, and that's what made it really good content. But then they were like, we don't like that. And then they took it into this, you do option A or you die. And that's the state that we're left at right now.
Yeah, that's
PTS had a lot of really good feedback. There was, I partook in at least 3 to 4 streams where we did both of the dungeons for 5 hours straight. That's a lot of feedback and a lot of time. And that's one group. There were plenty of other groups who did the same. And then there was the second to last week where Scalecaller was completely bugged. The Nereid didn't die. Then there was the week after that where the Nereid died, but she didn't drop her poison. And then that happened in live too. So a lot of it comes down to also classic ZeniMax Online Studios.
Var, it doesn't matter. If you could please take the next tools outside at least.
Can tanks still backbar lightning staff, or are they better off running double sword and shield? So the reason why tanks will want to utilize a lightning or even sometimes frost staves backbar is for 100% uptime on a crusher enchant, because your enchants proc off of light and heavy attacks as well as weapon abilities. So, if you have a Crusher enchant on your Sword and Board bar, and you cast Wall of Blockades, or Blockade of Elements from your back bar, and swap to your front bar, Blockade is a weapon ability. Thus, it will proc your enchant. So you will never have to worry about weaving or anything to keep up Crusher. Wall will do it for you. So that's why Lightning or Frost Staff back bar is really, really helpful. Obviously, Lightning is better because you're going to have that chance for concussion, chance for off balance, stuff like that. And Frost Staff, you don't want to give up Magicka resource management as a tank because you're using it to buff your group or stay alive. So Lightning Staff is preferred, but if you're that flavor player, then yeah, you can use Frost Staff too and utilize that advantage of it. Frost damage scales with Magicka, correct? Yes. Frost damage is considered a Magicka ability, so it will scale the same way as Flame and Lightning damage. So Magicka, spell damage, same coefficient, stuff like that.
Kind of an odd question about Netch once again. Does Netch affect lightning staffs?
Yes.
Yes.
It's any lightning damage. The only thing that it won't apply to is if the ability does not have a spell damage coefficient. So Pet's basic attacks only scale with max Magicka, thus Netch will not make your pets stronger with basic attacks. Only your Volatile Familiar's secondary attack, the Pulse ability, that will scale with spell damage.
Thank you.
I thought Random was typing, but maybe not.
Full swift too.
He's trying to figure out what paragraph he wants to type out next.
Off balance changes, that only affects enemies above, is it 500,000 hit points?
It's not a HP value, it's a whether it's a boss or special elite. So elites in trials will usually be treated as bosses because the way that they do that is like if they're immune to crowd control, pretty much. Then they will be given the off-balance immunity. So it's not necessarily a hard coding where there are special enemy archetypes in this game. It's whether they're immune to crowd control or gain special variables and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah.
There's another
do you think
question.
it's still a good idea for like a Magblade to swap out to a Lightning back bar for trash mobs and then swap back to Dual Inferno?
For AoE damage, yeah, because if, like, especially in, like, HRC where you're pulling that humongous trash pack, Sap Essence is a no-brainer. So utilizing Ancient Knowledge H% or AoE damage with a Destro ult and then getting Soul Harvest procs to use another Destro ult, yeah, then Lightning Staff is still really, really helpful for AoE situations.
We have another question. Tanks get Magicka back from Ellie Drain, correct?
Yes, anyone gets Magicka back from Ellie Drain. Ellie Drain has no target cap on the amount of players that can utilize it, while the Templar's ability Radiant Aura or whatever the hell that applies it, that is actually capped at 6 players, and it's why we don't ever use it. Yeah, and that's actually why healers should always have a lightning staff as well, is because not only will they have that off balance and concussion application, but they will get magicka back from casting Wall of Elements. They get a magicka benefit out of it because it will constantly proc elemental drain, so getting that 300 regen or 200 or whatever the hell it is now.
And once again, guys, if everyone has any questions, just let us know. You can type or whisper us or post in guild chat and we can get it to them.
I heard that if you use lightning staff backbar and fire backbar, if you bar swap, you use AoE passives. Yeah, so the way that Ancient Knowledge works is it is not considered a hard staff that things like single target dots will inherit. It is an active effect. So if you swap off of it, you will lose the benefit of it. So if you are using AoE abilities on your backbar, and you're using a flame staff. So if I cast Wall of Fire on my back bar, obviously I have a flame staff. But if I swap to a lightning staff on my front bar, Ancient Knowledge will kick in and buff my Wall of Fire. Because it is an active passive, not an innate passive. It is not a stat. Quick Siphon, useful for healers. It is very helpful for spell power cure uptime. However, if too many people are applying minor lifesteal, it will actually cause SPC uptimes to go down. So you have to be careful with it.
Is that because it has a refresh time, the same as Ellie Drain?
Because it conflicts on whose it belongs to. So it mainly happens when you use Quick Siphon and Blood Altar together, because Blood Altar, while it applies the same debuff, which is lifesteal, that does not stack. Like, you don't get double lifesteal. You can still have them both active on the same target. If I cast Quick Siphon on you, and then you're sitting in my Blood Altar, I can have 2 sources of lifesteal on you. And if I'm running SPC, the game is going to have a hard time discerning which one it's going to use, and it's going to have issues with calculating, and my SPC uptime on my allies is going to go down if they're hitting that target.
I heard recently regarding Ellie Drain, actually. If you recast it before the timer is up, does it take up the off balance that is up on the dummies still? Because I know previous patches I heard that it does, but I'm not sure about current.
That it takes...
It eats up the off balance on the dummy or on the target.
Ellie Drain eating off balance?
Yeah, I think it was refresh. Refreshes it.
It takes like half a second to refresh or something, so your Ellie Drain time will go down or something. It won't eat off balance.
I've never seen anything like that, and since they're 2 completely different entities, like, Ellie Drain has nothing to do with off balance, it doesn't apply concussion or anything like that. If that did happen, it would be really interesting to see, like, video footage of it, and if that, it would also be a bug, so I would report that. But yeah, I've never heard or seen anything like that. I know there was a bug a very long time ago, before when 1 Tamriel was new. If someone used Ellie Drain from a different faction, only members of that faction could benefit. So if I had 3 AD, 3 DC, and 3 EP in the group, and the EP casted Ellie Drain, only those 3 EP could utilize Ellie Drain. That has been fixed for a very long time. So that could be like resurfacing as someone referenced an old video, and no one likes looking at timestamps, so they are rumor mongering. But yeah, I've never heard of it, especially with off balance interaction, because those are completely unrelated buffs.
Okay, I just wasn't sure because I remember hearing about it, but I wasn't 100%. Wolf says he wants to know what your favorite skin is.
Favorite skin? You know, it would have been Bloodroot after, if I could still have my Point Armiger tattoo on my face with it, but I don't know. I'm a little bit salty. Yeah, they fixed it. Last patch I could have the face tattoo on and this skin. but now you can't anymore. I think, what's it called? The one from Maw of Lorcage is probably still my favorite.
The Tremothra one?
Yeah.
They had that one that was for sale with that lightning horse that looks just like the Maw of Lorcage one. It's the blue eyes with the blue kind of like veins.
Soul Shriven?
Soul Shriven?
Yeah, Soul Shriven. Yeah, I think it's Soul Shriven. It looks pretty cool. I don't know if it's Soul Shriven exactly.
That
but
one? I think the one that Bar has on.
I know I have it. Let me look at it.
I think I know what
Shriven?
Mind Shriven.
Yeah, I don't like looking like a decrepit garbage. If I didn't get these wrinkles, I wouldn't mind it, but...
Do you get
Tell
wrinkles?
us what you really think.
Yeah, look at my face. It looks like I haven't eaten in 3 years.
Well, Soul Shriven looks like that. Mind Shriven just makes you blue with like light blue eyes and blue veins.
Yeah, but look at my cheeks too. They're really like
They're, like,
stuck to my
sunken in.
face. Yeah, it looks like I'm a vampire. But then if I put on Bloodroot, I get back my normal face. Look healthy.
Ugh, yeah, no, look at this Mind Shriven. Ugh.
Mind Shriven, I love the way Mind Shriven looks, especially on an Argonian. Makes him albino with like blue eyes.
Hey, Hibiki.
Yo.
It's all about the COS skin, obviously. Best in slot.
The COS skin? Oh gosh.
Yuck.
That's even worse than the Mind Shriven one, honestly. I don't know, I kind of like the Maw of Lorcage skin with the lipstick.
Let me try. Like mine.
Got hit on my Mind Shriven.
With a red lipstick.
I did have a question actually. So I made a Nightblade healer because I'm stupid. What would you suggest like for bringing her into PvP? Do you have any sets that you would suggest for Nightblade healer specifically? Like to bring into PvP is just a backmender just to get AP to get barrier.
So you're gonna be in a group, not solo, or not
Yeah,
like
I'd be
small
with a
group.
I'd be with a group or even just like a BG's set. Would I just use a regular Magicka Magblade DPS set or?
If I was doing BGs, I would use something like Wizard's Riposte for the defensive capability, and then I would pair that with either a sustain set or a set that's going to buff healing, so something like Kagnarak or something like that. But if you're doing group stuff, then I would probably run Desert Rose, because sustain is... Desert Rose is really, really strong on a healer. You'll never run out of Magicka. And then you usually pair that with either a tank set so that you can sit in a group and get even more Magicka, or another healing set. Like Sanctuary would be really strong on that, because you would give everyone in that group healing as well.
I love Sanctuary. I've had so many debates about people with Sanctuary, and they keep telling me that, you know, Mending is better than Sanctuary, but no way.
In terms of PvE, yeah, because the way that Mending works is it applies a weapon and spell damage coefficient to PvE entities, because PvE entities aren't players, so the way that their abilities do damage works a lot differently than a player's. So Mending gets almost triple the value that it normally would, like, that you'd think of it would. Like, if you utilized player coefficients for abilities, it would be very weak. So Mending in PvP isn't that good. But in PvE, since we're not dealing with players, it's really, really strong. Like, you can reduce the damage of a mob by, like, over 30% by having Mending on it. It's incredibly powerful.
I mean, I run Mending on my Warden healer just because everything's AoE, but my Templar healer, I've actually started running Twilight Remedy again since they fixed synergies. And the uptime on it's been over, like, 70-something%.
Yeah, I mean, it is a nice set, especially with the healing that it offers, but in terms of, like, if you're looking at trial sets, then Mending, like, I almost always want Mending on a healer, at least one. The only time I
always
wouldn't...
want one healer with Mending, and then one with either Worm or Twilight or Sanctuary.
Yeah. That's usually what I would go with this patch, is something like that. I don't really like Master Architect on healers because they're using Warhorn, so that the uptime of it is going to be really, really short, and then Yorvald's Guidance is really not that efficient either. I think if Yorvald's Guidance needs to apply to debuffs before I would actually consider.
And it doesn't even apply to Spell Power Cure.
Correct.
Because it's not a major or a minor.
Yeah.
Gilliam,
That
as a trolley kind of build for PvP, would you ever consider using Jorvald's Guidance and Daedric Trickery?
Yeah.
No, David Trickery on a Magplar or a Mag build of any description?
I would probably run it on a Stam build, not a Mag build, just because the passives that it enables are more stamina eccentric. So, I mean, you could. It would be very trolly, and you'd have a really high uptime of it. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of what you're actually doing in PvP, I don't know what that would actually bring to the table.
So we were thinking that because most of the members were DC, and when we made the guild, it was made EP. What is the likely chance of us sending a ticket into ZOS to have them to change it?
Change the
And
guild?
actually, yeah, from EP to DC.
Just the faction.
Faction change.
Yeah.
I honestly have never heard of that happening, and I haven't heard of it being attempted, so I would say it's worth a try. But I feel like they're going to tell you to remake the guild, because it's like, oh, you can just delete it and then make it again and just put in all of your variables. But
every character I have is DC, so
yeah.
Yeah, when we made it, it was like, I think the one guy that wanted an EP, and then like he doesn't really come around anymore, so we're just kind of like, all of us play DC. It makes more sense.
Yeah, I'd say it's worth a shot, but I would also be very worried, because if something goes wrong and your guild bank gets deleted, that might be a little scary. So if you have valuables in there, and then if they tell you no, then yeah, it's just like, if you really wanted to do it, copy paste all of your like guild settings, stuff like that, screenshot your roster or ranks, heraldry or whatever it is, like make sure you have all the information you need and just make another one.
just have other people remake DC characters.
In terms of time efficiency, I think one of them is actually much more time efficient than the other.
Yes, let me just level up 3 new characters to level 50 and all that. Yeah,
have
I leveled my last character in 5 hours, so it's not impossible.
but there's a difference between leveling a character from level 50, from level 1 to 50, but then leveling skill trees and all that kind of shit.
Yeah,
like leveling Mages Guild, Undaunted, Fighters Guild, all that stuff takes a lot more than 5 hours.
Yeah.
No, it's true, but you do know that XP scrolls do apply to like Mages Guild, Fighters Guild, and all that.
Nah, it doesn't apply to Mages Guild. Been there, done that.
Really? I was told that maybe like 3 weeks ago.
No, Mages Guild, you have to collect books.
Yep. The only thing that it applies to is if you can generate it from an event. And quests are not events, because quests are a one and done experience. You can't repeat them. So
even books, that doesn't apply to books either.
Books are not events because they're not repeatable. You can't read the same book over and over again and generate experience.
If only.
Yeah, because they classify Fighters Guild, Undaunted, and Mages Guild as reputation.
Yeah.
Reputation is not experience.
Even though killing Daedra and Undead does give you XP.
Yeah,
No,
we're talking about
it gives you
Mage's Guild.
XP.
So,
Gives you
it's like,
XP and
if you're trying to level Mage's Guild, you need to... XP scrolls aren't going to affect it.
Yeah, but XP scrolls will apply to crafting and stuff like that. So if you're trying to get alchemy up to 50 to get your alchemy passives, then you can drink an ambrosia or something like that, and you'll need less materials to level it.
I did not know. I did not know
wish I
that.
knew
worked.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Alchemy is the easiest thing to level anyway.
Yeah, but it can get expensive if you're leveling like 15 characters alchemy from 0. Takes a lot of mats, so utilizing experience and inspiration boosts is very helpful. So getting the CP passive for inspiration, and then utilizing XP benefits, like being in a group with an ally and XP scrolling or potion.
On the topic of on the topic of XP, not XP, of faction change, has there been talk? I know there's a lot of people out there that want to faction change their character. What will be the reason for ZOS not putting something like that in the Crown Store? Because I can see that as a very lucrative thing that for a cash grab.
Because the way that the game reads your faction and what it tethers you to. So your faction dictates the way that NPCs will interact with you. It dictates the way Cyrodiil will interact with you. The way that, I guess not abilities anymore because that's been changed. But it's a pretty big system. And even with guilds, too, because if you're a certain faction and your guild is another faction, the game is constantly reading, hey, this tabard must not display if I'm in Cyrodiil. So it's a lot of work on their end to do something that would be as simple as changing. So games like WoW, your faction wasn't as hardlined or ingrained into your character development as it is in this game. And that was just... I don't want to call it an oversight. They knew what they were doing, but they made that choice then to save on time and stuff.
Okay, so that's a very valid excuse why they haven't done that despite the game being out for so long.
Yeah, and it's why that they don't do platform exchanges anymore either, is because it's a very in-depth process. Because they don't transfer it, they literally delete your account and remake it with every little thing that you had on there. And then if they miss something, you have to catch them on that.
Yeah.
That's why people were doing the whole get a buddy to transfer you a bunch of crap. Money, gold, tempers, everything. Literally what they would do is just take a snapshot of your account and then recreate it on another platform.
So we did have a question earlier, a little bit earlier, before it gets buried in the chat. What sets are the current meta for solo PvP Magblade?
Calrians is really strong right now, but it's more of a single target set. Spinners is always going to be strong on any Magicka build in solo. Lich, if you need sustain, is probably your best sustain set. Trans is helpful for group. Wizard's Riposte is the best defensive set in the game in PvP. There's a lot of options. It depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to gank? Are you trying to bomb? Are you trying to 1vx? Stuff like that. It all changes up what sets you want to run, as well as what you're comfortable with.
What are your thoughts on cost increased poisons in PvP?
They're dumb as fuck and should never have been introduced to this game.
And especially with them stacking this patch.
Yeah. I mean, Austin poisons aren't even the worst thing that came out of poisons, and that's all I'll say. There are far worse things in this game in the poison system than cost increased poisons. Is that the same reason why name change tokens cost so much? Yes. Yeah, this game is held together by duct tape and bubblegum. So, changing stuff is always scary. Like, when they reworked the interrupt system to not be applicable to CC immune targets, that's why CC break was broken in the PTS and when this went live, because of that. So simply changing one system that interacts with that system has the chance to break everything in the process.
That's why PTS exists.
Yeah, no shit, duct tape and bubblegum.
But not enough people do PTS to.
But plenty of
weed out all
people.
that stuff.
No, there was dozens of videos showcasing how broken it was. It's the fact that PTS is such a short time frame, and that ZeniMax is strangled into meeting release dates. Even with glaring issues, they can't say, okay, we need to push this off. They have to release content on set intervals because of the business team strangling them.
I do have a question about. I read some of the data mining that's been going on and talking about the next chapter, spellcrafting, that we've been promised for, what, more than 2 years. I hear it's finally coming. Have you heard anything about that?
I've just seen a few screenshots that everyone else has seen that references material and information about spellcrafting. Yeah. I personally don't think that it's going to be what people are expecting if it's coming at all this patch. I think we would have data mined a lot more information than we would have if it was coming to be like a really grand system, that the way that it was displayed at QuakeCon in 2014 or 2015.
So we're never going to see like Skyrim spellcrafting, basically.
I would compare it more to Oblivion spellcrafting, but no, I don't think we will. Not for some time, if at all. But I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't asked, and even if I did, I wouldn't be able to know. Or if I did, I wouldn't be able to tell it either.
Goddamn NDAs.
Damn it. I needed to know.
Wasn't there also something about jewelry crafting in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that too. What do you?
How do you think that would work?
I think that it would work like crafting. So it would allow us to upgrade jewelry, and then it would allow us to craft jewelry of the crafted sets, like Hunting's Rage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's exactly how I thought.
Yeah, I don't think that it'll allow us to retrait them, because that would be really, really broken. Because if you could retrait heavy armor sets into arcane or robust, this game would be even worse than it already is in PvP in terms of balance of sets. So
wouldn't that devalue the doing in-game content then? If you're able to get gold jewelry that is otherwise unavailable unless you complete said content.
Like I said, of crafted jewelry.
Okay.
They don't ever want to do anything that stops you from having to do a grind, because as long as you're doing a grind, you're paying a subscription to have to play the game.
Yeah, but who's to say that they won't also put a grind behind jewelry crafting? Because jewelry crafting will require new resources for us to utilize. So very much well could be a grind worse than like Moondancer swords or some shit like that.
Do you think they'd implement enchanting as part of the jewelry crafting?
What do you mean?
So like if you want to upgrade it to like let's say a gold Hunting's Rage ring, do you think they'd make you use Kuda to upgrade that, or never?
I think they would implement a new tier of materials to be utilized. So it would be even more expensive than tempering alloy, because there's much less of them in existence, because it would be a new commodity that everyone's after.
Kind of like how transmute crystals were. They'd probably make it tradable.
Yeah, I would assume that it would be a tradable currency then. And it would probably be brought into base game.
I got another question for you. It said, do you have any... Okay. Do they have any future plans to separate CP benefits from the gear in the future? Example, placing all CP benefits in the CP trees versus CP level gear. Huh? Fire, if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
You mean increasing the CP cap effectively of gear, so like going up to CP 180 gear instead of 160?
I'm not sure. Separating CP benefits from the gear.
They are separate. I don't understand the question.
I think he's trying to say like so let's say you have gear that does like a proc lightning damage, and your CP is buffing that. I think, but I don't know.
Removing CP 10 to 160 gear levels. So just making max gear, just like level 50 gear.
No, that wouldn't make sense for them in terms of like an MMO build, like building like the way that you structure your game. That wouldn't make any sense.
And I had a question, just a general question, I guess. I've seen this question a lot lately. How do you think their best chance to revive Craglorn Trials would be at this point? With people doing like VS, VMAL, VHOF lately, it's like everybody, like the V-Crags are just kind of like left out. If that makes any sense.
They wouldn't need to, because...
Do you know if they're going to come back and revisit them and add things to them, like similar to a polymorph? Or do you think it would be beneficial to them?
I think it would be beneficial to them. I think that the Craglorn Trials could use either reworking in terms of their mechanics so that they feel new, or introducing new things to them that aren't necessarily just, oh, hey, go farm this new gear set and never come back, sort of. Because there needs to be a challenge behind it. Because people aren't doing VAS because it's gear. They're doing VAS because it's a challenge, and because it has new things behind it. So increased incentives.
Something like they did with the dungeons, where instead of like, Fungal Grove 1, there's like, Craglorn Trial 2.
You mean like utilizing the same instance but filling it with a new trial, pretty much?
Yeah, I mean basically how they changed the normal dungeons when they introduced the twos to have new aspects to them. They could still use the same kind of basic reworking of the SO basically, but it would be SO2 with different bosses and maybe different directions to go. And
that sounds like a lot of effort for them in base game content. So from a business standpoint, it wouldn't serve much of a purpose, but from a developer standpoint, it would be fantastic. Like I as well as the developers would probably love to see that implemented, but I feel like that would never come because it can't be pay gated.
We got another question, it looks like, regarding Magblade again. Have you ever seen the melee Magblade build some people are running? What do you think about it?
I mean, I'm very close friends with Pina PKK, so I'm very up to date with what melee Magblades are running. It's really strong, but it's not something most people are going to be able to pull off. It requires a disgusting amount of brain power in terms of micromanaging a lot of different things, and it's very easily countered. There's a lot of different ways you can play it too. So if depending on if you're going bomb or 1vx and stuff like that, that always changes up dynamics of a build in PvP. But Magblade Melee is in a pretty rough spot right now. You have to be an exemplary player to pull it off. Oh, and PvE?
Yeah, PvE.
Melee Magblade? You mean just like wearing Zanz or Grothdar instead of Valken? I mean, that's pretty much the only difference. Or utilizing...
I think he means using dual swords and Master Architect and Mechanical Acuity, and then a monster set.
Yeah, so dual wield is trash on every Magicka build except Templar because of the importance and damage of weaving. The only reason Templar can get away with dual wield is because they're spammable as a 1.1 second channel, meaning they effectively get less weaves off in total. Thus, the amount of damage that they lose from it is lesser. So gaining that set bonus as well as a tiny little bit of spell damage and raw damage is actually a benefit in some situations for the Templar, but only if they're melee. Magblade doesn't have that problem. In fact, it has the exact opposite problem. They want to do more weaves, which means Inferno staves make way more sense. Like, dual wield Magblade Sure, it can deal decent damage, like it can break 30k, but that isn't really saying much in terms of comparison to what the actual like competitive builds are.
Another question. Do you know how much exact DPS percentage that golding out all armor from purple adds? All divine with weapons and spell damage Mundus.
That's not a set value because it's a percent based. So in terms of like comparing armor only, it's pretty small. It's maybe like 1 to 2% DPS difference. Assuming you already have gold enchants on your gear and stuff like that. And the only thing that you're gaining out of it is the set bonus boost from going from purple to gold as well as divines. Probably, like, again, 1 to 2% DPS increase. But on weapons, that's a much larger game because weapons should always be gold if you're trying to deal damage. Because you get a huge spike of weapon and spell damage from going from purple to gold.
Another question. Sorry, I had popcorn. Is Master's Inferno and Flame Clench more viable than Funnel Health Spam?
No. In PvE, no. Definitely not. In PvP, dependable, because again, Flame Clench has the added utility of having a really cheap CC if used with Master's Inferno. So it can be very, very nice, and it's why a lot of Magsorks use it in PvP. But in PvE, no way. You'd be giving up a huge amount of damage and healing and resource management and ultimate generation.
Speaking of the Master's Inferno, on a Sork, if I'm using a Sork that has just like a clench rotation, would it be more beneficial to use the Master's like lightning instead of like a 4-piece like Moondancer, or which one would be better, do you think?
You'd get more DPS out of a 4-piece set like Infal or Moondancer, just because Flame Clench only applies to the direct damage portion, while the 4-piece would apply to all of your damage.
This is really, really good popcorn. I'm sorry, but thank you.
So just regarding CP and how they're giving us extra points every couple patches or every new patch, how are they gonna basically balance it out? So like, we're getting all these extra points, but the values of the trees aren't changing at all. So we're just gonna end up with like max values and everything eventually, aren't we?
Yeah, eventually once we get to CP cap, it'll be like we have no CP at all, because it'll be looked at as a constant. Everyone has the same variables, thus it can be ignored in terms of comparison.
I think they've already changed that with diminishing returns.
No, because you're still... CP cap is 3,600. That is the maximum you can ever get, is 3,600. And once everyone has that, everyone will have all nodes maxed to 100. Thus, everyone will have the same exact stats and amplifications, thus changing them to a consistent variable, which you can thus ignore, because it's a constant. It's the same. So in terms of math, if you have 2 equals 2, they're constants. They're the same. So you can ignore them. So if it's a part of another equation, you can X those out. So what they need to do, I'm not sure if they're going to, is either rework CP completely to not have a cap in the sense of everyone will eventually reach the same place, as well as move away from raw stats of like flat damage, flat healing. It needs to be more dynamic and build oriented. So hopefully they either limit the amount of CP we can spend, so maybe like 1,200 CP is cap instead of 3,600. So there is still 3,600 spendable nodes, but after 1,200 CP you stop generating them. That way you do have different builds and different allocations for CP. But even that would be kind of iffy because of diminishing returns, where every patch they make harder and harder content, based on the idea that we're getting more and more CP, but the fact of the matter is we're getting this CP, but every patch it makes less and less of an impact than it did before. So the game is just getting harder and harder and harder, while our characters are getting weaker and weaker and weaker effectively in comparison.
Not to mention it would kill a lot of the long-term players that want to like see some kind of progression. If they stop being able to even just get CP, then they're not even going to even want to play. If there's no progression, then people get bored and burn out.
Well, I mean, that's kind of already what it is right now, is that there's progression, but it's meaningless progression, or it's like preemptive progression where, okay, I'm at CP cap for the next 3 updates, so I don't grind. But me as a progression-based player, I have no reason to log on for the next 3 major updates because I'm not progressing. So, I mean, that's already happening, and I don't think that's as big of a problem as some other things that are happening in the game right now.
I hear you. I'm good for the next 7 updates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at almost 1,200 CP, so it's like I'm done chasing the carrot on the stick, so to speak, with CP.
Looks like we have another question. Is Charged a good trait for applying status effects, or is Infused still better?
Yes, incredibly. Charged is probably the most underrated trait in the game, but that's also because it's a very contextual trait. It's most powerful in solo situations, especially if you have at least fire and lightning damage. So it's really weak on stamina builds, unfortunately, because the only DPS, or the only damage types we have are poison and disease. The poison status effect is really, really weak, and disease status effect has no damage value to it because it's Defile. But Magicka gets concussion, which can also proc off balance, and then they get burning, which does a shit ton of damage and makes Wall of Fire better. So Charged is really, really good for a solo player using at least 1 to 2 sources of fire and lightning damage.
Does Charge have any effect on melee weapons?
Nope. Physical damage and magic damage has no secondary effect that comes from it.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't know if it would affect the enchantment, like if I put a fire enchantment on a sword or something like that.
Effectively, yes. Like if you used a fire enchant on your sword, it will increase the chance to apply the burning status effect. But in terms of like what DPS that is bringing you, it's not that much because that scales with your spell damage and Magicka. As a stamina build, you're not going to have a lot of that.
Got you.
Looks like I got another question, Tim. What is the threshold like for when you want to decide between building more max stats or more weapon / spell damage when it concerns maxing out damage input?
In what context?
Can you elaborate, Silent?
Yeah.
What you mean?
Basically, what I was trying to say is that I was debating whether to build like max stamina or more weapon damage, and I've noticed that I had better results stacking weapon damage because of buffs like Spell Power Cure, but in some cases it would be max stamina. So I was wondering if there was a threshold for like, okay, like do I build more max stam? Or do I build more weapon damage for like better DPS? I don't know if you would understand what I mean, but
yeah,
that's
so
the best way I can explain it.
That's a very dependent question because the way that this game works is every ability you cast has a coefficient that is static that scales with specific stats. So, for example, light and heavy attacks have a coefficient. For every point of stamina, you gain X tooltip damage. Same thing with, say, surprise attack or rapid strikes. Everyone has its own unique coefficient that multiplies versus your stamina and weapon damage or Magicka and spell damage. Some abilities only scale with stamina or Magicka, some only scale with weapon and spell damage. So it depends on what class you're playing. Like a Stamina Templar, if you're trying to min-max shit like Power of the Light only scales with your max stamina. Weapon damage does nothing towards it. So it makes more sense for you as a player if you're trying to get really high Power of the Lights, maybe for PvP burst, to stack stamina. Magicka builds like that use pets, so sorcerers. Pets usually only scale with max Magicka. The only time they don't is when they use special abilities, so like the Familiar with their secondary ability, or the Twilight with the heal. But if you're using Twilight Matriarch, or the one that does bonus damage, that only scales with max Magicka, so you don't want high spell damage because you're wasting your coefficients, because it doesn't have one. It's multiplied by 0. So it depends on what you're playing.
So, would it matter if, like, let's just say you're running a Sorc build, pet build, that you were to use the Mage Mundus as opposed to the Apprentice?
The Apprentice would still be advantageous just because the Mage doesn't scale as positively as the Apprentice does, because for whatever reason, some things in this game don't scale with certain variables. So CP gives you a 20% bonus to your max Magicka, health, and stamina after 300 CP. But things like Necropotence and stuff like that aren't affected by that 20%. So the Mage sees a hard limit in terms of its scaling because it doesn't scale as effectively with CP and other amplifications in the game. So even if you're a pet build, you go with the Apprentice, just because you have so much of your damage that's also going to be buffed by that, like your light and heavy attacks, all of your abilities, your Volatile Familiar Pulse, your AoE, that all will still scale with spell damage.
So you're saying to stay away from Necro and like Ancient Grace, which both increase max Magicka?
No, Necro is still really good. Ancient Grace is not, though, because Ancient Grace is an additive percent, not a multiplicative. You don't get the true 4% out of Ancient Grace. It applies to your base max Magicka, so it's much smaller than that.
Okay.
Why would you type that? Oh my gosh.
Somebody's typing again.
Did you put a Nightblade tank build video?
Yeah.
I think he had like Brahara's Curse part of the set.
Yeah, Brahara's Curse and Leeching.
Speaking of random,
I've been there, done that. Brahara's Curse and Leeching Plate on a sap tank. Nightblade was a beast.
bear pack random.
Yeah, the Bloodletter has been updated every major patch. I haven't gotten to the update video for Dragonbones yet, but not much has really changed with it, so yeah, if you're looking for that, then you can still refer to the Clockwork City build.
How does it work? Like, how is it effective, or is it kind of like, it's like, yeah, you need to have a DK tank, or something like that?
Is it viable to clear content? Yes, I mean, I've tanked everything except VAS hard mode on it. So it's viable. You can do stuff. It's just like it wasn't. If I'm going for a score, I'm not going to bring a Nightblade tank. They're not bringing my group anything spectacular that a DK can't do better or a Warden can't do better. So like yeah, the optimization portion of tanking is still ideal. You still always want 2 DK tanks if you are trying to be the truest, most optimal group ever. But
I have kind of a related question to that. Morag Tong increases poison damage that a mob takes. Leeching Plate says it does poison damage and heals you for that amount. I was told that Morag Tong doesn't affect the Leeching Plate, and also any plus healing that you have isn't affected by the heal from Leeching Plate. Do you know?
I have not tested that, but it should, because Leeching does poison damage, so if they're sitting in it and they're afflicted by Morag Tong, they should be taking bonus damage, which would mean you are effectively healed for more. Because Leeching is affected by CP, and it was affected by crits at one point, so the healing that you get is based off of the damage done, not the tooltip.
I hated how they changed poison damage from, it used to be under Mighty, which was physical, and now it's magic ability.
You mean vice versa? Poison used to be under Thaumaturge back when Thaumaturge buffed magic damage?
I think Mighty also said that it increased poison damage as well. But now, when they changed couple patches back, they changed Nightblade to where all your leeching abilities, all your siphoning abilities are now magical abilities instead of stamina.
That's always been the case. Sap Essence and Refreshing Path have always been magic abilities dealing magic damage.
And Mighty still says it increases poison damage.
Yeah, Mighty is physical, poison, and disease damage increase.
Even though it's a magic ability, it still is affecting poison?
Poison is not a magic ability. I'm not sure what you're asking. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Leeching Plate...
The Leeching Plate is its own thing.
Yeah, Leeching Plate is not an ability. It's a proc that does poison damage, so it is affected by the Mighty CP node.
I'm actually talking about the Nightblade ability, the siphoning, like...
Leeching Strikes?
AoE, not Leeching Strikes, the siphon ability that hits multiple mobs.
Sap Essence?
Sap Essence.
Sap Essence has always done magic damage and has always been affected by Elemental Expert and Thaumaturge. The only time that it didn't is back when Elemental Expert did not exist, and Thaumaturge was what Elemental Expert was. That was the only time that it didn't, and that's very,
I
very
think that's the answer to my question. Thank you.
Wait, how is that pronounced?
Thaumaturge?
Thaumaturge.
I know Dutch just said something about now knowing how to pronounce it, so I was
Everybody
like,
always mispronounces that. Everybody's like Thaumaturge.
Wait. What's the how do you pronounce the item used to upgrade medium armor?
One.
The gold.
The gold one.
Regwax?
The wax.
It's Drew
Wax. It's technically Drew Wax, but
It is pronounced drag. It's pronounced drag by every NPC in the game.
exactly. So we call it Dregwax because that's how it is pronounced in Elder Scrolls. But it is phonetically spelled out Drewwax.
That's like trying to pronounce any dwarven ruin or group instance in the game that's got like 5 consonants together.
Oh, like
How the hell
Nichin something over
Yeah.
in Barnfell?
Sneeze
Sneeze one.
Nitchel Clift? I have no
Oh, yeah.
They wrote the name by sneezing on the keyboard.
You know, if you don't spam E when you're talking to NPCs, you'll find how everything is pronounced.
We had another question, by the way, for stamina DPS. Some people say for more damage output in regards to a target dummy that Lover Mundus performs better, but has seen equivalent or slightly better results using the warrior. I guess my question is, when does penetration fall off short in relation to weapon power? When should I stop building into penetration? Is it better to allocate my CP into other areas and leave the remaining CP to pen?
So penetration cap is 18,200 in most situations. If you're fighting... So if you're a stamina build and you're fighting a Daedra or a Dwemer Construct, it is 18,500 because they are resistant to poison and disease damage. So they gain a 300 flat extra resistance against those attacks. So the closer and closer you get to penetration cap, the less and less effective penetration becomes because it is a % of your damage coming back to you because it effectively removes their mitigation. So you have a listed tooltip. You should never do more damage than that listed tooltip unless, of course, it crits. So, penetration, in essentially, the way that it works is your tooltip hits an enemy and they mitigate a portion of it. Penetration starts to push that back and says, no, you will not mitigate a portion of that, and you will do true damage. So, your listed tooltip damage. So, the closer and closer you get to penetration cap, the less and less it's pushing mitigation away because there's less mitigation there to push back. So usually around 15 to 16k is when penetration starts becoming less and less advantageous. This changes based on your build too, because bleed damage ignores mitigation. Someone has an open mic, by the way.
Terraform.
I play on a huge TV, and my mic's right in front of my TV.
I was waiting for somebody to mention. I didn't want to mention it.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
bleed damage ignores mitigation, so penetration is useless. So if you're using a lot of bleeds, then warrior will be better for you, obviously, because a big portion of your damage is bleeds, thus the lover is useless. So on target dummies especially, lover starts to taper off about 15 to 16k, and it's why warrior will be better. And the same thing in a group is you cannot over-penetrate in this game, so the closer and closer you get to that 18-200, the less and less effective it becomes, and after that, it becomes literally 0. So you could have 20,000 penetration, but you'd be wasting 1,800 of it.
I know a lot of people say that when you're doing parses on target dummies that you can't use hope things like lover.
It's more of a guild rule.
Yeah, there's a lot of like misconceptions in terms of the way that it's done. So a good player will always try and hit CP or penetration cap. That's your number one goal as a DPS in every situation is how close am I to penetration? How much do I need, and how much should I give up if I'm going over? That's what a good DPS player will do. So a good DPS parser who's doing a training dummy will change their gear based on those situations. Because if you're going into a pug group where your tank is running boosted sets that aren't Torrigs and Al-Kasha or anything like that, they're providing no group utility, then you really need penetration, otherwise your DPS is going to plummet. A good player will recognize that. But at the same time, if your guild wants you to wear a specific setup in raid, then you shouldn't be changing your gear to cheese better results, because that's going to inflate your values, and you're going to get different values. So it's all about what's being required. Like, are you trying to optimize in terms of being a good player and understanding how penetration works? Or is a guild trying to recruit you as a buff bitch or as a full damage dealer or stuff like that?
I always get told that I'm a selfish tank because I love Fortified Brass and Plague Doctor. Because I love being at resistance cap and being able to perma block and mitigate like 90% of damage.
In honest, you are being a selfish tank.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes that is advantageous. If I'm going to go into LFG and I have 2 DPS with a fucking bow and a resto staff, why would I ever run penetration sets? They're doing 2,000 DPS and they get 10% more out of it. That's 2,200 DPS. Big fucking deal. I'm going to wear... That's why I built the Bloodletter, was so that I could make a build that anyone could wear where it didn't matter that you had to have God's Gift DPS or people who knew what they were doing. Because the fact of the matter is that's not what most of this game player base is about. It's about going in, having fun, doing whatever, and being versatile. So that's why I made the Bloodletter. It is a very selfish build, but it fits its purpose greatly.
I need my resto bow bar.
I can tell you that it's worked out for me because in Vet White Gold Tower, everybody died, and I sat there and shield bashed Mola Kenna to death. So it's helped me on several occasions. I like not being able to die.
Let's see. Follow-up question. To bleed, does ESO consider physical damage dot as bleeds?
No. It has to specify that it is a bleed.
I think we had another question.
The perfect example for this is that Rend, by all visual, lore, etc., is a bleed. You literally fucking hemorrhage the enemy player and blood spurts from their body. But Rend does not state it does bleed damage and is affected by mitigation because it is not actually a bleed.
That's stupid. So I mean, like, there's very few things that are even bleeds in the game.
Rending Slashes, Carve, Twin Blade and Blunt from two-hander and dual wield, which both stack because they're unique entities. There are some item sets like Twin Sisters or whatever. So yeah, there isn't a lot of bleed damage in this game, but when you can utilize it, it's very powerful.
Yeah, I wanted to make a bleed build, but like I was looking at everything available and just kind of fell short. But I thought Rend would work.
Yeah, Rend says slash an enemy in front of you dealing X physical damage over 16 seconds. It does not specify it as a bleed, and thus the game does not treat it as one. But then you look at rending slashes, and it says dealing X physical damage with each weapon and causing them to bleed for an additional X damage over 9 seconds. It specifies, hey, this is a bleed.
Thought we saw another question here. Oh, okay. It was the worm question again. Somebody's typing. What hits for Stamina Templar? Front bar radio, sweep / back bar, flawless dawnbreaker, or front bar, flawless dawnbreaker, back bar, bow ulti?
Depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to utilize War Machine to make your group better, then you want radial sweep on your back bar and dawnbreaker on your front bar. But if you are trying to just do as much single target damage as possible, it's flawless front bar and ballista back bar.
He's here delusional.
He's always delusional.
Stamplar base.
I just have one more question. There's been a lot of gripe about ice staves in their taunting ability. The fact that nobody uses ice staves as they taunt. Is there any plan to get rid of that?
I would hope so. I really would love to see ice staves reworked, but I have not heard anything from the development team that it's being worked on.
I mean, everybody loves the shield. Everybody loves the freezing aspect, but you can't use it in a trial because it taunts, unless you just don't take that passive.
Well, I don't think anyone's using a frost staff for the shield either, because the shield is non-existent.
It's like wing. It's like a 1% shield.
Yeah, it's like 2,000 damage shield. It's incredibly weak.
Silent, it usually depends on the group. With Worm Cult.
Yeah, if you have a full group full of Magicka, then yeah, Worm Cult would be better than a couple of other sets.
I rarely ever run Worm. If people know how to manage their mana, they don't need Worm.
But more Magicka means more DPS.
Yeah, Worm is really, really strong, and a lot of people who don't understand buff sets and utilization and the powers that they bring to the group really underestimate the power of Worm. So Worm not only allows your Magicka DPS to do more DPS because they don't have to heavy attack and stuff like that, but it also allows your healers to buff the group more because they have to worry less about resource management. So that means more SPC uptime because they're healing more. That means more combat prayer uptime because they have extra resources to spend. Worm is incredibly important in many situations. The only time it isn't is if you're doing a Craglorn trial where no one's taking shit tons of damage where your healers have to spam really high costing abilities to keep them alive.
It also helps out tanks who have to chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Spam their Igneous shield.
Engulfing Flames uptime is higher from a tank. They give more damage shields with Igneous. Worm is so fucking strong, and so many people overlook that portion of it. They just think, oh, I don't have to heavy attack as much. But what does that actually mean? What does less heavy attacking in my group mean between DPS, healers, and tanks?
I mean, as a healer, I'm never out of mana. Because your heavy attack adds to your healing ability anyway.
You mean gaining major mending for 2 seconds after getting... Like 3 seconds after heavy attacking?
Yeah, so you throw a heavy attack, then a combat prayer, and I mean,
or you could just combat prayer, and like you don't need major mending for combat prayer to heal someone to full. Combat prayer usually crits for over 20k without major mending if you're built correctly, so
I don't know. When you have sets like Sanctuary, Twilight, Mending, Worm is I think it falls for it.
I think it comes down to what kind of players are you playing with, what is group composition, and what's trying to be done. The game is moved so far away from what this set is always good in terms of always run it into run what is ideal for you and your group composition. So
Yeah.
you can't just say, oh, well, with sets like this and this, why would I ever run that? Because again, it depends. If I'm in VAS with fucking 8 Magicka DPS, Worm Cult should always be in that group, no matter what. Because you have 8 Magicka DPS, 2 tanks, and 2 healers. Literally 100% efficiency out of Worm Cult. It makes sense. But if you're doing VAS really ballsy, and you have 3 stamina DPS, and your healer, you're doing a strat, maybe you're doing +2, and your healers are on complete opposite ends of the group, then maybe you don't want to run Worm Cult. Maybe you do, because that healer who's sitting in the corner has to heal more than the other, so they really need that resource management, so Worm Cult's helpful. Or maybe the group is too split up and no one gets it, so you don't run it. It's a very contextual situation, and that's what this game is about, is understanding the variables and controlling them to your favor.
Has any questions been asked about why Sorks have gone down in damage and pretty much Magna Nightblades have pretty much taken over in terms of the max DPS potential for Magicka?
Because off balance is not up 100% of the time, so the 70% additional damage with heavy attacks, which what Sorks were utilizing to maintain a high damage rotation, has gone down, while Magicka Nightblades never relied on heavy attacking to deal damage and only did it for resource management. And now that it gives double resources and there's more forms of resource management via synergies, Nightblades saw an indirect buff while Sork saw an indirect nerf. It's the same reason why Stamina Nightblade is doing so much better than this patch than before. Is it itself really hasn't changed. It was made slightly easier with Relentless Focus, but that wasn't the issue. It was that here's this really hard rotation that's very fast-paced, and if you have to heavy attack, you lose that fast-paced. So getting the double resources from heavy attacking off-balance target, getting working synergies meant more resources for the Stamina Nightblade, so it indirectly sees a DPS advantage, while other classes like Stam DK and Sork, who relied on heavy attack for all of their damage, or like over 20% of it, saw an indirect nerf. Now, those classes are still doing really, really well, but for the Mag Sork versus Magblade, like Stam Sork and Stam DK still have things in its kit that make it stand out. Magicka Sork is in this really awkward spot where its toolkit's fucking garbage because 90% of the skills do the same exact thing with different wording. So it doesn't have things that it can default to. Like Stam Sork is like, oh hey, I just get more Shrouded Dagger spam now, or more uptimes. Stam DK is like, oh, well now I can run more damage sets or do whatever. I can run a spammable now if I want. They had things to default to, while Mag Sorks don't have options because their kit is so abysmally designed.
And it's also from people have been telling me that I mainly play Mag Sork for my DPS, so it's like if I go to Mag Blade, okay, so I have a really cheap spammable, while I go to Mag Sork, and while I play a similar style as a Mag Blade, I have to use this very expensive spammable, and all my other stuff is crap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Proc.
Yeah, and then Nightblade has a reliable form of burst via Merciless Resolve, while Sorks have an unreliable form of burst because it's a fucking proc chance. So sometimes you get 3 C-Frag procs in a rotation, which messes everything up, and then sometimes you get none, where your resource management's bad. So
yeah, that's me. I get none.
Like, all this patch has done has really shown what an awful state Sorks have been in since this game launched. They've always been in this situation where they're either way too fucking strong, like when Pets came out, or back when Mines used to hit everything in its area, and you could do like 3,000 DPS back when 1,200 DPS was amazing.
Shields lasted forever.
Yeah, like, Sorks have always been in this situation where either too good or too bad. Like, they've never been well balanced in this game because their kit is awful. They really need a rework.
So from a DPS perspective, let's say, because I see everything from a tank's perspective mainly, so I could tell if, like, in a fight, if the DPS is doing really good in terms of single target, and I could tell if it's doing not really good in terms of AOE perspective. So would, like, what's the differences between Sork and Magblade in terms of AoE and single target? I already know Magblade's like top dog single target, but what about AoE?
AoE Mag Sork's better because they have more AoE in their kit that makes sense. Like, they have more passive AoE damage. Liquid Lightning is the best AoE dot in the game. Amazing. Twisting Path is good, but it's not as good as Liquid Lightning. Then you have their ultimates. Like, Destro ult's good on either. Lightning Destro is better because Fire Destro is currently bugged and not getting its 10% damage bonus, so it makes more sense for a Sork. So they're going to have more AoE damage right now. Then they also have their pet, which does passive AoE damage. A fucking lot of it at that. Like, and then they scale better with heavy attacks. They don't have to change their bar setups like a Magicka Nightblade is like, okay, am I doing single target? Am I doing AoE? How do I change my bars up? A Sork is like, oh, I just heavy attack more this time, or make sure my pet is doing his AoE a little bit better this time. They don't have to change up much. Like, they're a very versatile class that fits in well with all situations and gets relatively respectable damage, and they have nice group utility. Magicka Nightblade fluctuates in terms of its importance greatly, and it's also much more skill-based.
There is a few people leaving, by the way, because they have a Maw trial. If you guys are in that Maw, go ahead and leave whenever you have to. I know you guys are full right now, so. There is a question. Let's see, how many people should wear War Machine or Master Architect in an optimized trial setting? 2
to 3 at max. 3, you should never have more than 3 DPS wearing it. 2 is usually the preferred.
Thanks, Gil. I've got to go, mate.
All right.
Thanks for doing this.
Yep, see you later, Random. Have a good one.
He's one of them in there, so I'm not surprised. Someone else said, please tell us to fix Maw and chill on the Magicka DK with a Nerf bomb.
Yeah, I mean, don't need to tell me to tell them that. I've been expressing my opinions on DKs, the state of PvE, as well as crashing and stuff like that for a while, so.
I made a Magicka DK for this patch, then turned it right into a tank.
Deck, I got 2 words for you. Get good.
I've had a Magicka DK for the entire existence of this game, and I've just watched it go down, down, down.
Yeah, I made a Mag DK for VMA, and then she just sat there collecting dust, and now she's just sitting there with no gear on her.
Silent, I can answer that question for you myself. No, it's not, because you need Stam to block. And if you're using Frost Staff, you gotta be really good as a tank player to use a Frost Staff for a Magicka DK tank.
How are you going to use Necro on a DK tank? You don't have a pet.
No.
No comment.
I'm still up in the air on Warden tanks.
Warden tanks are the closest things we have to a DK tank, but they still don't cut it in terms of pure optimization. They're much more viable than any other tank in the game when put into comparison of competitiveness. Like, they are more competitively viable than a Nightblade, a Sork, a Templar, but compared to a DK, they still come short. They don't have as good of a CC because their version of Talons doesn't have a synergy, so that means less group damage, less group resources. less Alkosh uptime. They don't have chains. They have this really wonky, awful, clunky ability that teleports like 2 to 3 mobs at a time that takes 2 global cooldowns to enact
Just
upon.
one. Just one.
It's just... I thought they made it so that it shoots out 3
You can have
things
3
now.
at
But you
a time.
can have 3 out.
So you
but
have
only
to
can get
cast it
one.
3 times. Okay, yeah. Okay, so my point still stands. You have to utilize 6 global cooldowns to pull 3 adds. That's
The only time that I found that it's very effective is in VDSA. You can throw a port on each direction and stand in the 4th, and everything that comes from those 3 directions comes straight to you.
Yeah, or you could just have 1 DPS per side and kill everything on their own and not have the need to pull stuff.
Or that.
like
There's
in
that
terms
too.
of optimization, it's just like the Warden doesn't bring anything unique, because the one thing that they had going from them was their AoE Major Warden Resolve buff. But in the same patch, ZeniMax was like, ooh, let's give every single class an accessible form of Major Warden Resolve. And it's like, you just deleted the one important thing that this class was bringing that people were excited for from a PvE aspect.
Yep. And Warden, Mage Warden will never like come up to par to anything else.
Let's see. We got another question. How does Mag DK perform with a heavy attack build combined with elegance?
If you're looking for an easier build, you can definitely do that. That's kind of like the Netch version of the Sork build with heavy attacking. You'd utilize the Lightning Staff with Molten Armaments and Elegance and stuff like that, but compared to the Lash or Molten Whip build, you'd still be doing less single target damage, but you'd be doing more AoE.
Oh, shit.
How do you feel about proc sets like Ravager, where it's Ravaging or whatever gives like 600 and somewhat weapon power plus whatever it does for the 4-piece? It's like 740 something weapon power, but it's a proc set that has to be used on skill. Do you think that's ever a viable thing?
In what? In PvE or in PvP?
In PvE.
In PvE, no, because it's a heavy armor set. So, right away, you either have to wear 2 pieces of heavy armor and 1 healthy jewelry and 2 dual wield, so you're forced into dual wield. It won't permanently be active when you bar swap off, so the uptime isn't going to be 100%. You have to run healthy jewelry, and you have to wear 2 pieces of heavy armor. So you're giving up a lot of damage right there.
What if you did weapons and jewelry?
Then you'd have to run 3 healthy jewelry, and you'd be giving up a shit ton of damage because you wouldn't have a high stamina pool.
Okay, so the 700 SP, weapon power would make up for the...
No, and then it's never going to have 100% uptime either, because it has a cooldown within its own proc.
It says it's up for 10 seconds and can happen every 10 seconds.
But it has an 8% chance to proc off of direct melee damage, so damage over time and stuff like that isn't going to proc it. So its actual uptime in a real situation where you can just monkey out and do a rotation is about 50 to 60%.
So worthless, basically.
It's not worthless. Like, in PvP, this set is literally disgusting. It's incredibly powerful in PvP, but in PvE, it's a damage set in heavy armor when heavy armor isn't designed to do damage.
Holy shit. Like 5 million people started typing. We have at least two more questions. Probably more because 10 million people are typing. Do you prefer axes or swords, or one of each when using mechanical acuity? And does this change for AoE situations?
1 axe, 1 dagger is ideal for mechanical acuity. That way you have good single target and you have good AoE damage, and then you have good sustained damage when acuity is down. That's the ideal setup.
I should have waited to gold out those axes.
Yeah, 2 axes is only for target dummies, or like, because The way that crit chance works is if you do a short parse, crit chance can either look really bad or really good. While axes, it's like, the more and more I have this up, the better it's going to look on a single target fight. So a lot of people did like 3 million or 6 million health target dummies, and they're like, ooh, double axes wins by 200 DPS, it's better. But then when you go on the 20 million or the 50 million, it's like, wait a second, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Why does a Lamberts not crit? Because it's a proc set. Proc sets cannot crit.
They changed that a while back.
Is it still worth putting 75 points in Thaumaturge for a Mage Stork? It is if you are doing a lot of trash DPS, because remember that only bosses and elites are immune, so if you're doing like Maelstrom Arena or stuff like that, then off-balance uptime will not be hard limited to 25% unless you're fighting specific enemies, so it's still advantageous in some situations. But most people have moved away from putting like maybe 56 to 61 points into Thaumaturge and then just putting those points elsewhere.
Oh, here's a question for someone. According to Zos, what exactly is direct damage by definition?
Direct damage is anything that only hits once in under a 7 meters range. So, for example, light and heavy attacks, melee damage. Now, this is the one exception because heavy attacks actually have a 10 meters range, but they're still considered melee damage because whatever the fuck reason ZeniMax decided to do that. But like surprise attack, melee damage. Biting jabs, not melee damage because it does not hit once. It hits a set number of times over a duration. Take flight, for example, has a range, but its AoE upon landing is under 7 meters, thus take flight is melee damage.
Reptar, why don't you just say advantageous again?
Advantageous?
So no mage or magic or range skills are direct damage, even though they just hit once.
No, in terms of direct melee damage, sorry. I thought he was asking about Ravager. But direct damage is anything that just hits once. So if it's not direct melee damage, if it's just direct damage, that term is anything that only hits once. So Merciless Resolve, direct damage. Force Pulse, direct damage. Because it's 3 entities of Force Pulse. It's 1 fire, 1 lightning, 1 shot, or 1 frost. It's 3 entities that are separate. So that's all direct damage. Curse, the Sork ability, Haunting Curse, is actually direct damage. Now, Haunting Curse doesn't make sense because it's like, wait, this hits twice, but that's because the base morph is direct damage, because after a duration, it hits once, 1 interval of damage. Thus, it is direct damage.
Alright, let's see.
So, biting jabs, all for Magplar punching sweeps, is not considered direct damage.
Correct.
So I should be buffing
it is damage over time.
Okay, so I would want to buff Thaumaturge if I'm using like a puncture sweeps build for a mag.
Correct.
Okay.
See, someone said, does using Eben on weapons matter when you bar swap since you lose Eben for a split second?
I'm pretty sure if you have Eben active on... So if you're running 3 jewelry and double sword and board, I'm pretty sure they fixed it. So if you bar swap off of Eben onto Eben, that will not happen. But if you bar swap off, like if you have like Eben 4-piece, maybe a lightning staff, then you will still lose the benefit. I haven't double checked that, but I'm pretty sure that was patched, like in between Morrowind.
Okay, and then someone says for Stamplar, 2 daggers, or what else would you use?
If you're not running Acuity, yeah, 2 daggers is ideal. Otherwise, if you're running Acuity, 1 axe, 1 dagger. If you're doing pure single target, you can also do 1 axe, 1 dagger, even if you're not running Acuity. But have fun carrying another weapon around with you every time you do cleave damage.
Does carrying 2 dagger or 2 axes double the chance for giving the dot?
Yes, instead of 8%, it's 16%. So you get no like raw damage increase, you only get the uptime increase. But that also means that you also have a chance to override your current bleed, which means you will lose damage. So let's say I light attack and it applies the bleed, and I light attack again and that applies the bleed. I just lost a 6-second dot because it refreshed instead of stacking.
I got you.
Let's see. Why does Mighty scale bad, and what is the most you put in a Mighty for a Stamblade?
So that is because CP has changed to have heavy diminishing returns, and effectively the lower percent that the maximum is there with, the more and more diminishing returns come into effect. So, for example, Mighty is capped at 15% extra damage. Meanwhile, direct damage from like Master at Arms or Thaumaturge or Precise Strikes, anything like that, that's capped at 25%. So diminishing returns set in very, very quickly with lower percentages because there's a less value overall. So when you get to about 50 or so, it starts hitting really heavy diminishing returns. So it doesn't make sense to put points in. But the nodes that are like 25% or even like Physical Weapon Expert, which is 55%, those are really, really beneficial because diminishing returns don't come into effect until much later on.
Let's see. Since Destro Sapphire ult is bugged, is Meteor better until it's fixed on a Magblade?
For single target damage, yes. For AoE damage, no, just because you're still hitting more targets with Destro Ultimate because it covers a larger area. But the issue that arises with that is you need to make sure you have an Ancient Knowledge ability on your bar. So if you take off Destro Ult and put on Meteor, what Destro ability are you going to put on your front bar without losing a lot of damage? And the answer is none.
I heard a rumor pretty recently that they reduced the radius of the
it wasn't
Destro.
a rumor. It wasn't a rumor. That was on a patch note. They nerfed the range by 2 meters. It's now 8 meters instead of 10.
Sucks for the mage. You can't hit both the mini mage and the mage.
Yeah,
anymore
that's
times.
actually where it came up. We were in VAA and yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to aim more, and if you're really unlucky with a mage that just procs in like Timbuktu, then you're kind of shit out of luck, but it just makes you think a little bit more about where you're going to place it. You can't just mash R, you kind of have to aim it. And then in PvP, it was pretty dumb to just have like the entire tower covered in Destro ultimates and you couldn't do anything if you were like being outnumbered or something.
And I had a question for daggers. Is it Nern infused now, or is it infused precise?
Nern.
Damn it. Okay.
Yeah, Nern front bar, infused offhand rather. So Nern main hand, Nern offhand. Now the reason why we don't run precise anymore is because continuous nerfs to crit hit damage, as well as the mechanical acuity. Like in terms of optimization, if you're running mechanical acuity, crit isn't really good for you to stack anymore, so you don't want precise. And then again, because once they nerfed the Shadow Mundus, precise on offhand saw a huge damage loss.
Prismatics you still want infused though, right?
Yes,
Infused
if you're
precise, or
no, you'd still probably do infused and then probably sharpened or something like that, and just take all of your penetration out of CP and put them elsewhere.
Okay.
But doesn't infuse also buff the your main hand? Let's say you got Nirnhone poison or Nirnhone with the anti-Daedra thingamajiggy.
So if you for example, if you had infused offhand and then Nirn main hand and you put the prismatic enchant on your main hand, the prismatic enchant cooldown would be cut in half, but it would not get the damage bonus. And since prismatic's damage is higher than any other enchant, you want to put it on infused because it scales better with it. Because the higher the number a percent has to deal with, the more effective it becomes.
All right.
Let's see. There's
someone Silent asked Khajiit or Redguard for more DPS.
Redguard is preferred in 9 out of 10 situations, especially if you're running Acuity. Then always Redguard.
For Stamblade.
For Stamblade, yeah, it's still Redguard because sustain. Because if you're a Redguard in a group, you can run Blue Food instead of Dubious. But if you're a Khajiit, you still have to run Dubious.
We've also got, which rotation for Magblade do you prefer? A more static rotation or a more dynamic rotation in which you keep dots up between each weave?
Dynamic rotation. So I have Twisting Path on my front bar, and I don't have a true rotation. I'm just managing dots as I go through and shooting Spectral Bow as much as I can. That's the better one, but that's not easy. And like in places like Asylum Sanctorum, when the fight is like when something becomes immune, having a set rotation is bad. So you might want to change up and go and just start over with the like maybe Twisting Path is still going. You still want to refresh it if you're not going to be on your back bar in time if it falls off. So you'd treat it as the back bar rotation.
Can you still light attack weave with Redguard and Nightblade using max food? Or do you rely on heavies?
Redguard does not rely on heavies, no. No. Their whole benefit is that they have superior sustain to any other race, so they get to run blue food without as much heavy attacking.
As for stamp decay, would you run Dubious or blue food as a Khajiit? If using Dubious, what will drop deep?
I would still run blue.
Drop DPS?
I would still run blue food as a Khajiit because Stam DK has no spammable, so their resource strain is much lower, and they're getting so much more of it back because of heavy attacking.
And he says thumbs up.
I wasn't here earlier. I think someone asked a question about 5-1-1 versus 6-1 and 7. What was the ideal
5-1-1
situation for that? Even on like heavy max DPS builds.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Because a dead DPS does no DPS.
Is that for both Magicka and Stamina?
Yeah, you should never run 7 light on a Magicka build. You are way too squishy.
Unless you're a healer.
That's another reason why I don't like having my healers run double light armor sets if I get to choose, because 7 light on a healer often spells death, especially in Asylum Sanctorum or Halls of Fabrication. And if a healer dies in there, it's not as easy as, oh, just res the dead DPS and just take a minute longer than we would. It's like, oh fuck, we die now, and do the whole 20-minute fight over again.
That's why I make sure all my healers have 20,000 hit points.
Yeah, so I mean, if you are running 7 light on a healer, then you need to run Prismatic Enchants. Because you need health.
Prismatic Vis.
Yeah, Prismatic is so fucking good. I mean, even on a DPS, like, you give up such little but gain so much.
I agree, completely.
I think my healer's running infused big with prismatics, and it's so nice.
Yeah, that's exactly what I run. And people have written them off and told me that I shouldn't run those, and I was like, I laughed at them.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would say that. Especially as a healer, like, you're not giving up that much, and you're just gaining so much. It's like, if I never die, then my group should never die.
I had a DPS the other day, he had like 14k health, and I'm like, dude, why are you even in a trial with 14k health?
I mean, that should never happen.
That should never happen, and he sat there and argued with me for like half an hour about it.
There'll be people like that. Oh wait, man.
If only as a healer, which I always am, I could selectively target who I heal, I wouldn't have healed him.
Nightblade healer, just throw down healthy offering at everyone.
Right?
Except for the
just kill yourself, right? While trying to keep the group alive.
Hey, it doesn't let you get below. Well, you can't kill yourself with it unless you like bring yourself down to like 200 and then get smacked by like the warrior or something. It's definitely fun though. I'll give it that. The 8% mending is nice from it too.
It's a really strong heal. Yeah, healing more than 2 people with it is something I would not do because it costs.
Yeah.
Even after the health reduction, like, I really like offering in 4-mans. Like, Nightblade Healer is really fun, always has been, and it's now even more viable than it was. But in terms of trial healing, I wouldn't even slot Malevolent Offering unless I'm just getting it for the minor mending, and even then that's kind of iffy because bar space is really hard to manage as a healer because there's so many things you can do.
Yeah, I've been putting it on mine only just for the minor mending. Just throw it on the tank and then just get that minor mending is really nice. Or on a healer, I guess, but... someone else is typing.
I've been playing a healer since beta, and DPS is like such a foreign concept to me. It's still trying to learn it.
Pretty sure I goated
Definitely,
my first healer.
definitely a change of pace. Tanks, healers, and DPS all play so very differently in this game that it's pretty jarring going from one to the other.
That's what I play. I play tanks and healers. But I mean, all my DPS are fully geared, and I'm kind of a loot whore. And as soon as my DPS are 50, they're in complete like VO and everything they need to be. But I just can't. It's the attack weaving that just gets me.
Okay, so somebody has a question about your the max orc that you're leveling on your stream. Will you be playing it mostly PvE, PvP, and what sets will you run?
PvP, and you have to wait for the build video. Sorry.
Trade secret.
It's a flavor build. It's Zillion from League of Legends. So I'm going to be running sets that bring that character to life in this game. It's going to be really fun.
Silent Ninja says, "Can you carry me through VS for the skin?" Oh jeez. The ever
There's a
popular
lot of people that
question.
want that.
Favorite character is Echo. If there was more like time magic in this game, see, the cool thing is the Psijic Order was data mined as a skill line for next patch, so we might actually see something like that, like some time magic, which would be really cool.
That's what I heard. It's going to be a guild that we can join, just kind of like the Thieves Guild or the Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah, and I hope that means we get active abilities from the guild the guild tree line, instead of passive abilities, because I really hate that Dark Brotherhood and Thieves Guild were passives only. This game, it really needs more options in terms of what our characters can use. Like, we need better weapon diversity, we need better armor diversity, and we need more guild diversity.
I would like stealthy gameplay.
Yeah, that too. That's personally for me, that's like my number one complaint about this game is stealth has no purpose in PvE. So the Nightblade is like a flavorless husk of damage, and it's like I really wish that I could play the rogue that I played in WoW.
I think the first time
Wait
I
a
met Reese, he was
minute.
mad at me because I was cloaking in a dungeon because I thought
There's
it actually
stealthy
did something.
gameplay.
There's no stealthy gameplay in end PvE.
Oh, I'll talk about more of the
There's
heist and all that stuff.
there's RP. No, but I mean like using stealth in my rotation. So like I could use Vanish in my rotation. I could use Shadow Dance in my rotation, like where I would enter stealth but still be in combat. Like playing a rogue in WoW felt like playing a rogue. I was a sneaky motherfucker. You can't do that in this game.
Okay, I see what you mean now.
You realize you just said a bad word multiple times.
Hey, it's like I swear like every other sentence.
No, I mean, wow.
Oh, lol.
How dare you say that?
Exactly. That's sacrilege in this game.
Is using rearming trap good in real trial applications? Oh my fucking god, for Magicka builds. What about using Stalwart Guard?
Rearming Trap is really strong if you do not have to conserve your stamina bar. So like in Halls of Fabrication, I wouldn't use it because you need to dodge and block so much. In Asylum Sanctorum, you can use it if you're really good. Rearming Trap is fantastic in Asylum Sanctorum, as well as other places. It also changes depending on what class you're playing. So like Mage DK and Magicka Nightblade both have room for it in their bars without losing a lot, so it makes sense. Magicka Templar, not so much. Magicka Sorc definitely doesn't have room. So it depends on the class as well as what you're doing.
I just can't see that you have to be in like melee range to use it.
Yeah, but if you're playing a class that is played more like a melee caster, like a Nightblade who comes in for Soul Harvest, or a Dragonite who has Whip, or a Warden who's managing like all their stuff, like it makes more sense to do that. So, like, because you don't have to sit in melee range, I can still use like Zans or Trap Beast if I'm playing a ranged role, because I just come in, proc them, they go off, and then I leave. But you cannot use Stalwart Guard as a Magicka DPS because you do not have room on 2 bars to give up a spot. You would have to have your healer do it, and that's extremely dangerous in most of this game. The only time Stalwart Guard is really ran is in Craglorn Trials, where damage is so negligible that a healer is like, oh, whatever, I give up orbs or whatever. I still have shards for resource management. I can still keep everyone alive with combat prayer or springs or breath or whatever it is. Then you can do it. But even then, I really don't think that Stalwart Guard is something that anyone other than a tank should really be using. And even then, it's questionable because it's like, what if a tank gets hit by a heavy attack as a stamina or Magicka DPS does at the same time, and then the tank just dies and everyone else suffers because you wanted to get 2% more fucking DPS on your parse?
Yeah. Hibiki,
It only matters if it's a
real quick.
nutcracker.
Hibiki, keep an eye on the chat for questions, but I have to go. Real quick.
Okay. Okay. Question from Silent Ninja X. Does it matter if I take off inner light on the back bar or another ability so I can stay on my front bar more often?
So it depends. If you're using single target dots, those will retain the stats that they're casted with. So, like, for example, if I have Cripple on my back bar, but I only have Inner Light on my front bar and not on my back bar, Cripple will not get the max Magicka that Inner Light is giving me, even if I bar swap to it. The only time I could do it is if I cast Cripple from a range and bar swap before it lands and Inner Light is active. And then if it does that, then I can freely bar swap off and not have to worry about its damage fluctuating.
This has been really informative. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'm not one for meta builds, and I'm not one for really watching like YouTube videos on builds or whatever. I kind of work my way through things, but you've answered a lot of questions.
Guess we ran out of questions.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Oh,
Let's do a trial.
Yeah, right.
Thoughts on Magsorgs using Dawnbreaker in PvP? Dawnbreaker Smiting is such a strong ultimate that even though it doesn't scale as well with your stats because of CP, it's still really strong. And in no CP, it's even better because you don't give up as much damage because you don't have to worry about Mighty and stuff like that buffing it. But yeah, it's still really, really strong. But it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all ultimate. Like, I wouldn't run it all the time. Like, if I'm doing group PvP, I would rather have Negate for my group. Or if I'm trying to catch people off guard, I'm going to use Meteor or something like that, or Destro if I'm trying to, like, keep people stacked. So, it's more of, like, a 1vx tool, so when you're fighting, like, 1v4 or 1v5, Dawnbreaker Smiting is really, really strong.
What did Twerk just say? Oh, he said the bushes.
I got kind of an odd question for you. Do you think we'll ever see like a true bow build?
That was the first viable stamina DPS to ever face this game.
Yeah.
I don't
with
think we'll ever see it come back to its glory, like being the best. But I think Rich Lambert loves bow builds. Every patch he asks me to make. So I think we'll eventually see them come to a better spot than they're in now, but I don't think they'll ever be as strong as they used to be.
I know that I got 2 Asylum bows now and was just kind of messing around with the dummy parse, really not trying to do anything, and I got 31k with it. So
yeah, their damage production isn't their issue though. Like bow build does really respectable damage for the most part. Like they're not hitting 50k, but they're able to easily break 40k with a proper build and a proper rotation on most classes.
That was with the Stamsork.
Yeah, their biggest issue is that they have no survivability. Is like they're played from a range, so they don't have as many mechanics to pay attention to, But since so much of this game's mechanics are designed to hit melee and range, like Mauve Lorcage and stuff like that, it doesn't matter. Yep. They don't have the damage shield that the ranged Magicka build has, and they don't have the Blade Cloak that the melee build has, so they have no defensive capabilities. They move slower when using their spammable, so that makes them even more susceptible. That has been and always will be the Bobo build's falling, is that it has no defensive power. That's what needs to be.
Let's see. 2 questions. Is Reaper's Mark good for AoE, and is Proximity Debt good for AoE?
In PvE, Proxy Debt has not been good. The only place that it's ever good is if you're hitting more than 7 targets, because it has a scaling amp in it. So, like, I could see you slotting it in a few places in trials, like in HRC, like if you're doing that huge pull, where the room with a Warhorn or whatever, before you go into the Warrior, Proxy Debt could definitely be viable there. But in terms of a PvE rotation, no. There aren't enough situations where it's doing enough damage, and then Reaper's Mark is good in single target and AoE, as long as you can proc it. It's really, really strong. But it's also, it makes your rotation even harder, because not only do you have to manage the things you'd normally do with the Stam build or Mag build rotation, but you also have this new mechanic where you need to make sure you always have it active on a target who's about to die, and then to utilize that right after as well.
I need Undaunted. Did anyone have any other questions at all? I know we had some people join in. You guys are welcome to ask a few more questions. Don't want to take up too much of his time, so probably another like 15 or so minutes. Shushies. That is not my fault.
Do you think they're going to start moving forward and, I don't know, make MagDK a little bit better going forward? Or
Definitely.
Do you think it's just, yeah?
Yeah, I think that they are constantly looking at what needs to be done. It's just really delayed. So the way ZeniMax works is that they respond to feedback quickly, but they don't implement it until late. And the issue with that comes is that they're constantly innovating for the future. They're designing around the future, not the past. But then at the same time, they're utilizing feedback which is based on the past or the now. So the end product that we get is all over the place. And it's why we have patches where some classes are really, really weak or really, really strong. And I think that cycle will continue unless they really reevaluate how they address patch like loadouts, like what they're doing with each patch, what their focus is, as well as content creation with the game in terms of, are we going to take one chapter or one DLC off where we just improve base game, or are we going to stick with the always making new and let everything else old kind of sit there and maybe do a few tweaks?
I've seen so many MMOs fall to the prey to the flavor of the month kind of thing, where every patch that comes out, there's a new flavor of the month, and that build is the shit, and everything else falls behind.
That's more of a community thing than a developer thing, though, because, like, when you look at it, like, this whole Acuity thing that everyone's fucking hyped up over, like, oh my god, Acuity's so good.
Oops.
When you look at it compared to other stuff, they're really close. It's like maybe 1,000 DPS difference. And to the average person, what is 1,000 DPS? Like in a 4-man dungeon, when you're there for 10 to 15 minutes, what is 1,000 DPS? That's saving you maybe 30 to 40 seconds. Big fucking deal.
Yeah.
So
it's also been slated to be nerfed for like a good solid month or as soon as PTS came out. So I'm fully expecting the nerf to come soon. I guess my one last question is, how bad do you think people are going to cry once they actually raise the gear cap?
If they only increase the gear cap and don't implement a system to increase current existing gear, like if there was no way for me to make all of the gear I'm wearing now scale up to CP 180 through either some crafting system or through some content where you kill it and the boss blesses your item or something like that and it becomes stronger, if they just implement a system where you have to regrind everything with no system to take pre-existing gear and empower it, this game will die easily.
Yeah.
I'd be done, yeah.
Yeah, so many people would leave, and ZeniMax is smart enough that they know that if they ever do make CP 170 or 180 or whatever the hell it is gear, that there needs to be a way to take gear you've already obtained and make it up to date.
I've said the same thing so many times. People keep crying for a gear cap increase, but I was like, that just would kill this game.
Why would anybody cry for it?
Yeah, I don't think...
Tying it to the transmute system.
I mean, the transmute system would be a great aspect to it, except for the fact that in order to use the transmute system, you have to have all 9 traits researched, you know?
No, you don't. You only have to have the trait of what you're trying to get researched. So if I want Nirnhone, the only thing I need is the Nirnhone trait researched for that slot. So if I want to make a Nirnhone dagger, then I need to have that trained. I don't have to have 9 traits.
That's true. I guess I'm just speaking personal experience of 9 traits. So I have one crafter that does all my transmuting.
Yeah, I do too. But it's like, unless they increase the amount of traits available in the game, it will pose no issue to people who already have it. And then the other thing is that reaching the trait research cap, or like learning all of the traits, is so much easier than it used to be, because writs have the things that you can consume and that will knock a day off or whatever. So it's like you consume a voucher and it says, oh hey, you've gained 1 day of the Nirnhone trait and you had 30 days, now it's 29. So, and they're relatively cheap too. It's like 4 or 5 writ vouchers, so it's really, really easy to learn all of your traits if you're utilizing that system.
I think it's 3 writ vouchers per paper, and if you don't want to do writs and if you just have a large thing of gold, it's 5K from the traders.
Oh, they have to do the crown store thing, which a lot of people cried about because they were saying that it's pay to win.
It's not.
But that was only implemented after they had an in-game way to do so. So it's not pay to win. It's just... it's the same service that is built into the same game. Just you can choose to do it from money or from earning it. And to be honest, with how easy it is to get writ vouchers, rather, or how cheap those are, it makes no sense to spend money on it.
I agree.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Silent, I can answer that for you.
Yeah, Silent has a question regarding Warden tanks, asking if they're better or equivalent to DKs for tanks.
Obviously, Warden.
I think I talked about this a lot earlier and said DK tanks are the best tanks in the game in terms of pure optimization, so that should be your answer.
I think I asked the same question about 10 minutes ago.
That toughness passive, though.
You mean the same one that Warhorn gives?
Yeah. It's just... it's hard to pass up.
Yeah, that's why you use Warhorn, and it lasts 30 seconds, and you have it up 100%.
That's true.
And
yeah, like a Warhorn rotation.
Yeah. And I mean, even one tank in 4-man content can keep up the 30-second duration up 100% if they're utilizing like an ulti-gen set or like Dragon or something like that. So,
or even Heroic Strike.
Yeah, exactly. It's really easy to keep Warhorn's base resource increase, the Magicka health and stamina, up by 10%.
Hell, I can pop my one-handed shield ultimate every like 12 to 15 seconds.
Yeah, so because that passive used to stack with Warhorn, and we were like, wow, Wardens are really nice. And then they were like, oh, that's OP. Let's nerf it.
It's like, screw that, never mind.
Yeah, it's like, it makes no sense because you look at the class where it is now, and it's like, in PvE it's useless in terms of pure min-maxing. Like, there's no reason you'd ever play one in terms of pure optimization. But in PvP, it's the complete opposite. And it's like all of these changes that they made only affected PvE. It's like if they had AoE Major Warden Resolve or like some unique armor buff that ignored that, they would have group utility in PvE. And it still wouldn't be crazy in PvP because there's so much penetration. And it just makes no fucking sense that they have left the class to rot in PvE and still overperform in PvP.
Having played more than 15 MMOs since like the 90s, I can tell you that there's never been a game that's been able to balance PvP and PvE.
Oh yeah, I know.
Never. It's just impossible.
Everything's just so different. Do you think? I think I've heard people say that the devs are really against separating the two. But
yes, Rich Lambert has openly expressed that a player should not have to learn two completely different systems between PvE and PvP. And every time he says that, we fucking laugh at him because it's like, all right, why does Battle Spirit exist? Okay, why does mitigation change in PvE and PvP? Why is why all these things? Why do I
it's
have
already completely different at this point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, try to play, I play a healer. I try to play a healer in PvP, and it's retarded.
Yeah, if you play a healer in PvP like you play in PvE, you're going to die. All the time.
Yeah.
People are going to be, oh, hey, look at your Sanctuary Orbs, and fucking 3-shot you, because you have no mitigation, no tankiness.
Exactly. What I ended up doing is I made it a light set of fortified plate, or fortified brass, and ran Lich.
Yeah,
and it actually
it's
works.
Completely different game.
It works really well, because I don't have the green orbs floating around me. I have max resistances, max impen, and I can sit around and run around and heal.
There is no max impen.
Well, I mean, I'm
impen?
at, yeah, 3,500, I would say.
As much as you can get from.
Yeah.
You can get like over 4K crit resist in this game between transmutation, all impen gear, and the CP system in resilience or resistant.
That's where I'm at. I'm at all impen gear, CP.
So we have another question. We'll go ahead and call this the last question. Just because it's about around 11. What is the best setup for the biggest heals for PvP?
In PvP, biggest heals, like ignoring staying alive, ignoring resource management, like just pure heals?
Yes.
Can I answer that one? Spam mutagen and combat prayer.
No,
and you win.
I think he means like gear sets, which would be like Sanctuary and then like another heal set that either gives you a huge amount of spell damage, so something like Julianos, or some other set that increases healing. But yeah,
like you just said, Sanctuary is going to make you a target, and you will.
That's why I specified. That's why I specified. Is this only looking at healing tooltips and not survivability or anything like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen like 40k Breath of Lifes in Cyrodiil with pure healers, but those pure healers also fall over when you look at them. And that concludes the interview for the most part. I clipped out a few parts that were irrelevant, as well as a bunch of empty spots, so if there was any weird audio hiccups, apologies. But again, hope you guys were able to get something out of this. If you missed it, it was really fun. Looking forward to doing many more of these in the near future. See you later.